Chapter 2455. Meg maintained a certain distance from Angelina's deliberate closeness. He couldn't figure out what this woman was thinking. The show had progressed to the semifinals. She was currently ranked first with her strong and stable strength and popularity. This was no longer the stage where the contestants had to compete for popularity with their own abilities. There was no need for her to stick close to him at this time. Instead, it would put her image in jeopardy. Meg even suspected that this woman had ulterior motives towards him. Otherwise, her behavior would be too abnormal and not in line with the ability she had shown before. The elevator was stable. Meg stepped into it first and stood in the innermost corner. Meg thought that Angelina would back off, but he didn't expect her to step into the elevator before Iman and Patas and stand beside Meg. Meg suddenly understood why idols hated the so-called obsessive fans so much. Although the other party was a beautiful girl, it was still quite annoying to delay his mission. As if she saw the indifference in Meg's eyes, Angelina took half a step back and lowered her eyes slightly. She looked at Meg with some worry and puzzlement. Her lips moved, but she held back from continuing to talk to Meg. Meg breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this woman wasn't to the extent where she didn't know how to read people's faces. The elevator descended steadily from the 300th floor to the basement. Iman took the initiative to chat with Angelina in a gentlemanly manner, but the latter wasn't interested. Her eyes were always on Meg. That person looks like a dog. I feel sorry for Iman for 3 seconds, but this sudden relationship, it's really a little confusing. You're always tempted by what you can't get, and those who are favored have nothing to fear. Iman's participation increased the show's effect a lot, and the comments became more lively. Patas looked at the three of them and hesitated to speak. In the end, he chose to smile without saying anything. The circle of rich people was too messy, and he really didn't know how to intervene. It only took 30 seconds for the elevator to reach the basement. The group got out of the elevator and received the amount of money for the competition from the staff. 100,000 card coins. This was the amount of money that the contestants had received to buy ingredients. It was extremely extravagant to spend 100,000 yuan on ingredients to cook a dish. But for the contestants of the Chef King tournament, the cut was simply unacceptable. Both Iman and Patas had puzzled expressions on their faces. One had to know that from the moment they entered the top 16, any of the main ingredients provided by the production team was worth hundreds of thousands of copper coins. Including the side dishes, it was normal for the price of ingredients to exceed 1,000,000 copper coins. But now that it was the semi-finals, his budget had fallen instead of rising. He was only left with 100,000 yuan. So generous? Meg was a little surprised. After all, it was just a dish. 100,000 copper coins gave him the feeling that it was quite sufficient. Take the charcoal grilled lamb chops he made yesterday as an example. The price of a Mongolian sheep was only 20,000 copper coins, and he only took 12 lamb chops, so the total price would not exceed 5,000 copper coins. As for the dishes he was going to cook today, he had already decided in the elevator just now. All he needed to do was to look for the ingredients he needed later. After taking the shopping cart, Meg swiped an automatic shopping cart and entered the supermarket. Angelina's expression was equally calm. After taking the shopping cart, she glanced at Meg's back and walked quickly into the supermarket as well. Meg quickly found the fresh section through the index on the shopping cart, then found the beef section. Mocha Supermarket was a large high-end supermarket targeted at the small bourgeoisie. There was a wide variety of high-end ingredients, and there were hundreds of types of beef based on the place of origin and location. The beef here was butchered and placed on the shelves. The cuts were perfect and could be cooked directly after purchase. However, Meg walked around and reached out to test the temperature of a few types of beef. He shook his head in disappointment and turned to the inquiry button on the shopping cart. He asked, "Where can I get warm beef?" "This little cart doesn't understand what you're talking about. Can you repeat it?" replied the shopping cart in a gentle female voice. "Is this artificial retard?" Meg pursed his lips. "Hello, is there anything I can help you with?" The artificial intelligence was turned off and a real artificial voice came in. "I want to buy warm beef that was slaughtered less than an hour ago. Can you provide it here?" asked Meg directly. "Please wait a moment, I need to make some inquiries, replied the voice. On the other hand, in the control center of Mocha Supermarket, the customer service supervisor looked at the supermarket's general manager. We have our own slaughterhouse on the 38th floor. A batch of high-quality silver-horned bison just arrived yesterday. If he wants it, we can send it to the supermarket in 10 minutes, said the supervisor of the slaughterhouse as he stood up. Okay, then promise him. No matter what he wants, as long as it's in the main city, we can get it for him, ordered the manager. The customer service manager nodded and reconnected the call. Hello, dear customer. According to your request, we can provide customized service for you. What you need is a piece of beef that has been slaughtered for less than an hour and that still retains its body temperature, right? Do you have any other requirements for the beef's part, weight, and breed? I need the hind leg of a silver-horned bison that weighs about 1,500 kilograms. The weight is 1.5 kilograms, Meg said. He had just asked the system to check the supermarket's order list. The ingredients were ready-made and the price was reasonable. It just met his requirements. Okay, please wait a moment. The ingredients you need will be sent to you in 10 minutes. Is there anything else you need help with? No, thank you. Meg turned off the voice inquiry and walked to the seafood section according to the index. In 10 minutes, Meg bought 2 kilograms of ordinary whitewater prawns, 2 pieces of pork skin in the promotional section, a few common side dishes, and the warm beef that was sent to him on time. The total cost was less than 3,000 copper coins. This is the so-called warm beef. The meat is bright red and has a lot of elasticity. It still retains the body temperature of the cow. Of course, you can use any kind of beef as a substitute, but it's better to choose the more elastic hind leg meat. Meg showed the beef that he just received to the camera and smiled. Now that the ingredients have been purchased, I have to go back to the site to cook. Wow, isn't this saving a lot of money for the program? He only spent 2,800 copper coins for 100,000. I feel so immersed watching Hades shopping. He buys everything cheaply. 2,800 for ingredients seems to be an acceptable price. Do you rich people shop in the market like this? That's a month's worth of food expenses, including the gas. While others are still worried about the lack of funds, Hades has already returned with a full load. I feel like he knows what he wants to buy from the moment he stepped into the supermarket. The comments quickly flashed by, mostly praising Meg. At the same time, in the seafood section, Iman was looking at the 2 fish in the 2 fish tanks with a distressed expression. Which one should I choose? Iman scratched his head with a conflicted expression. Padas in the meat section had a similar expression. At this time, he already had a variety of ingredients in his shopping cart, but he also had difficulty choosing the main ingredient. He couldn't make up his mind for a long time. Angelina was very efficient in choosing ingredients, but she seemed to need to buy a lot of ingredients. Half of her shopping cart was already filled, but she was still looking for something. I didn't expect the slowest contestant to buy ingredients yesterday to be Meg, the most efficient one today, said Dave as he looked at Meg, who was the first to enter the elevator to return to the main venue. Julian shook his head and said, "It's obvious that the limits of a chef's vision are obvious. Even if he got 100,000 copper coins, he still couldn't choose the best ingredients at this price. I feel that from the moment he stepped into the supermarket, he already knew what ingredients he needed. Expensive doesn't mean the best, let alone the best ingredients for the dishes he chose." Old Hunter immediately retorted, "The price of whitewater prawn isn't outstanding among the various prawns because it's easy to catch and there are a lot of them. It's not because it tastes worse than other prawns. I personally think it can be ranked in the top 3 of the seafood list. It's also a common seafood that ordinary people often eat. On the other hand, some contestants are completely disrupted by the new rules. They don't even know what ingredients they need after they start to choose the ingredients. It's worrying." Julian's face turned red. Naturally, he could tell that Old Hunter was hinting at Iman. As his master, he was naturally unhappy. He said coldly, "Prawn and beef are 2 completely opposite ingredients. I'd like to see what kind of tricks he can come up with." Seeing that the 2 of them were getting more and more aggressive, Nancy chuckled and said, It's the first time I've seen a chef cook with ingredients less than 3,000 copper coins in the semifinals. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of food he can make. Julian glanced at Nancy and didn't say anything, but his face darkened a little. Judging from Nancy's attitude towards Hades, she seemed to be very interested in this newcomer. This was a little disadvantageous for Iman in the finals. This was the first time he'd let his disciple participate in the competition. One of the reasons was that he'd gotten the list of contestants in advance and confirmed that there weren't any famous or powerful chefs on it. That was why he'd let Iman participate in the competition. The competition was considered one of the top competitions in the industry, and the champion had the opportunity to become a special chef of McCarthy Manor. Just as he'd expected, Iman, who'd inherited his skills, had passed all the obstacles and successfully entered the quarterfinals. According to the original plan, his only opponent was Angelina. As long as he won by surprise, he'd have a chance to turn the tables in the finals. But now, Hades had appeared out of nowhere. He'd come in third place with a big gap in online ratings, less than 1 point behind Iman. Julian didn't know what dish Meg would cook today, but judging from the current situation, Meg, who'd chosen an ordinary piece of beef and 2 kilograms of ordinary whitewater prawn, seemed to be less competitive. Meg returned to the venue. There were only 4 operating desks left in the venue, on which the names and numbers of the semifinalists were written. Meg first greeted the judges, then returned to the operating desks. Contestant Hades, we see that you've chosen your ingredients very quickly and returned to the venue. Everyone is curious about one thing. What dish are you planning to cook today? Using silverhorn beef and whitewater prawn sounds like 2 completely different ingredients. Also, why did you choose these 2 ingredients? Asked Dave curiously as he looked at Meg. This was probably one of the questions that the judges and audience were more curious about. Silverhorn bison is produced in the Chihua Prairie. Its meat is excellent, but its price is much lower than other high-quality beef. It's a low-cost, high-quality beef. The piece I chose is a hind leg with relatively less fascia and fat, and it's warm-bodied beef that was slaughtered less than half an hour ago. Whitewater prawn is delicious, delicate, and smooth. It's the best among prawns, and it won't change just because of its low price. The whitewater prawn I chose is produced in the southern region of Whitewater. The water quality there is better, and the whitewater prawn produced is of a higher quality. As for the dish I'm going to cook today, I'll keep it a secret for now. When it's done, it'll be revealed, answered Meg with a smile as he took out his tools one by one and placed them on the operating desks. A sturdy wooden block, 2 large iron rods that looked like murder weapons, and 2 transparent glass pots. The judges nodded as they listened to Meg's words. From Meg's answers, they could tell that he had a deep understanding of the ingredients he chose. He didn't choose cheap ingredients on purpose, but chose the ones with the highest cost-performance ratio. After witnessing the extreme case of him cooking an ordinary lamb chop into a delicious dish yesterday, the judges' evaluation became more cautious. As a judge, they had to be unafraid of being slapped in the face, but being slapped in the face on the show was indeed not something to be proud of. Meg watched the teaching video that the class representative had compiled yesterday. While he gave the editor a thumbs up, he also felt sorry for him for a few seconds. Therefore, he still didn't do a live commentary today. As an idol, being cool was the most important thing. He boiled the pig's skin in a pot of water, and he needed to make a pot of meat jelly. He didn't rush to deal with the fresh whitewater prawn. He washed the beef that still had the body temperature of a bison, removed some fascia and fat, and then picked up the 2 iron rods on the wooden block and began to beat it. Dong dong dong. The iron rods hit the beef, making a pleasant sound as if a high-quality drum was being beaten. The extremely fresh beef trembled slightly on the wooden block, as if it was undergoing an irresistible hammering massage. At first glance, it looked a bit like a murder scene. But if one looked carefully, the beef was being hammered by the iron rods that weighed dozens of kilograms, but there was no scene of flesh and blood flying. The fresh beef was tightly adhered and became more and more sticky as it was hammered. It was changing shape at a speed visible to the naked eye. What is he doing? The judges and the audience were all confused. End of chapter. Chapter 2456. Angelina, Iman, and the other contestants also returned to the arena one after another after a round of shopping. As soon as they entered the arena, they saw Meg waving two big iron rods and hammering a piece of beef crazily. They were all shocked. It was originally a somewhat comical and violent scene, but Meg made it look quite artistic and beautiful. The iron rods, which weighed dozens of kilograms, were like two light wooden sticks in his hands. The speed at which he waved them was quite astonishing. The beating sounds were as dense as raindrops falling to the ground. The iron rods left after images behind, making it difficult for the audience to follow them with their eyes. Meg's expression remained calm, as if he was doing a very simple and ordinary thing. What is he doing? Is he hammering the beef? Iman's workstation was still next to Meg. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart as he placed the ingredients he had purchased on the workstation. In the end, he chose a rainbow fish, which was more than half a meter long. It cost him 90,000 copper coins, which took up the majority of the budget. If it was an adult rainbow fish, 100,000 copper coins wouldn't be enough at all. Tucker's Grand Hotel was most famous for its all-fish banquet. As Julian's favorite student, he also had good cooking skills when it came to fish. In the previous competitions, he deliberately held back. Yesterday's quarterfinals was just a small test of his skills by making a steamed yellow dragonfish. Today was the time for him to really show his skills. When he got up in the morning, he deliberately checked Hades's online PK value. The converted score had reached 7 points, which was only 2 points away from him. He had to show his true skills today. Otherwise, if Meg got another high score of 95, he would have to say goodbye to this competition. Padas also spent 100,000 copper coins and chose a high-quality golden lamb leg. This kind of 6th-level major monster was not common. Its meat was delicious and was very popular. Angelina only spent half of her budget, leaving her with more than 40,000 copper coins. However, she brought back a whole cart of ingredients, which was almost as much as the other 3 contestants combined. As usual, the taster commented on the ingredients chosen by the 3 contestants. At this time, nearly half an hour had passed. The contestants didn't dare to delay and quickly went into cooking mode. Meg repeated the boring hammering like an emotionless hammering machine. How many times has it been? 10,932 times. When I sent this comment, it should have increased by 12 times. What is he trying to do? Beat the beef into minced meat? But it's a job that can be done in 3 seconds with the mincing machine. Making simple cooking complicated. This is probably Hades's culinary philosophy. The audience gradually became numb. They were so bored that they started counting the number of hits. While Meg was hammering, he paid attention to the condition of the pigskin in the pot. When the broth became pure white and sticky, he immediately turned off the heat. After pouring the thick pigskin soup into the shallow mold, he fished out the white water prawns from the water tank at the side. With a wave of his hand, strips of skinless white water prawns with their intestines removed appeared on the chopping board. After that, he minced the prawns into a smooth prawn sauce, mixed it with the thick soup, and placed it directly into the freezer to cool down. That's right. Meg planned to make the famous bursting pissing beef meatball today. This famous snack was one of Meg's favorite dishes in his previous life. As for why he chose it as the dish for the semifinals, it was because of its outstanding performance on the spot. Meg had exchanged the recipe from the system. He hadn't officially entered the test field for the god of cookery to learn. However, after this period of practice, he had mastered the experience of a master and a detailed recipe. Meg was quite confident that he would succeed on his first try. The bursting pissing beef meatball and the meatball were both very important. The quality of the white water prawns was far better than the mantis prawns, and the hammering of the beef by hand gave the beef a soul compared to the wall-breaking machine. It used the chef's experience to ensure that the beef was in the best condition during the hammering. The iron rod in Meg's hand was specially made. It weighed 40 kilograms. It didn't feel good to hold a 7-kilogram iron rod, which affected his performance. The beef gradually turned into minced meat under the iron rod, but Meg didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. A large pot of beef bone soup was boiling in the side. The large beef bone was ordinary, and the fragrance gradually drifted out of it wasn't outstanding. On the other hand, Iman, who was processing the sea rainbow fish, had already finished slaughtering the colorful fish. The various side dishes used all kinds of fancy knife skills, and it was very pleasing to the eye, attracting the attention of many people. Of course, the most anticipated one was Angelina. This girl, known as the kitchen magician, was processing the ingredients on her workbench that almost filled up the whole place. What was surprising was that there was no meat in her ingredients. They were all vegetables. They're all vegetarian? What kind of surprise is Angelina going to bring us today? I'm really curious, said David in surprise. David exclaimed in surprise. Apparently, the judges had only realized this after she had laid out all the ingredients. It wasn't that meat dishes were mandatory in the King of Cookery competition, but compared to the relatively lighter and less malleable vegetarian dishes, meat had a higher upper limit. There were contestants who made vegetarian dishes in the show, but the results were not satisfactory. Today was the key semifinals, and the final two finalists would be decided. It was indeed a little surprising that Angelina chose to make an all-vegetarian dish. Iman and Patas couldn't help but look in Angelina's direction when they heard that, and a hint of joy flashed in their eyes. Angelina was undoubtedly the most competitive contestant on the field now. Whether it was her full score or her unconstrained imagination, it was hard for the other contestants to compare with her. They didn't expect her to choose an all-vegetarian dish today. Did she forget to bring the main ingredients? An all-vegetarian dish? Interesting. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't think there was anything wrong with Angelina choosing to make a vegetarian dish. A boiled cabbage dish could be on the state banquet menu, but a vegetarian dish really couldn't? It was just the chef who made the dish that couldn't make it. In the marshal's office in the defense building, Ferdinand looked at the live broadcast on the projection screen with a smile on his face. Based on Xi's feedback over the past 2 days, this little guy was very adaptable to life in the dungeon. He could even come up with a way to increase his popularity in such a short time, quickly gain Nancy's favor, and obtain a pass to enter the McCarthy family. Interesting little guy. I'd like to see what kind of changes you can bring to the dungeon. Ferdinand closed the live broadcast interface and called his secretary. Marshal, there's a letter from the presidential palace asking for your opinion on the Dixon family's money laundering. End of chapter. Chapter 2457. Our Mr. President actually took the initiative to ask for my opinion. That's really a rare thing. Ferdinand smiled and said, then tell them that I support Mr. President's decision and actions to uphold the law. After the call ended, Ferdinand got up and walked to the window. He looked down at the huge military base and fell into deep thought. In the west of Tucker City, in the square building that symbolized the administrative center of the underground city, in an oval office, a thin middle-aged man in a black suit sat behind the desk, listening attentively to the work report of the burly man sitting opposite him. Mr. President, the secretary walked into the office quickly and interrupted the conversation between the two men. He walked quickly to the side of the middle-aged man and said in a low voice, Marshal Ferdinand has given his answer. The president got up and shook hands with the burly man. Carmen, I'm glad you've returned to Tucker City. Go home and reunite with your wife and children. I'll need you soon. Carmen bowed slightly and said, I'll be at your command at any time. Then he left the office. What did Ferdinand say? The president looked at the secretary and asked. The marshal said that he supports your decision and actions to uphold the law. The secretary quickly replied and showed him the reply letter. He really can't stand the way these guys do things, the president said in a low voice. Get ready, I'm going to hold a cabinet meeting. The beautiful sound of drums accompanied me to sleep. When the dishes are done, remember to kick me. Although I still don't know what he's doing, I can say with certainty that this guy's arm strength is really amazing. I can be sure that he won't be roasting beef today. You all know how to praise him for being handsome, but I just feel sorry for my brother's hands. The number of viewers in Meg's personal broadcast room had exceeded 800 million. Because the process of beating beef was too boring, and it was not as pleasant as the words of the judges, the number of viewers in the program's main broadcast room had reached 2 billion. Nancy looked at Meg carefully. She was also curious about what dish Meg was going to cook. Like the others, she thought that Meg was going to roast some kind of meat today. When he was wandering around the beef section in the morning, she thought that he was going to roast beef today. However, he didn't expect that after buying the beef, he didn't take out the grill today. Instead, he cooked a portion of pork skin, chopped 2 pounds of whitewater prawns, and used 2 iron rods to beat the beef crazily. Even though the 10 judges on the stage were experienced and knowledgeable, none of them could guess what he was planning to do. On the other hand, Iman had already put the fish into the pot. Judging from the cooking method, he was going to make braised rainbow fish, one of the signature dishes of Tucker Hotel. After Patas's golden lamb leg was marinated, he put it into the oven. It looked like he was planning to make a roasted lamb leg. It was unknown if it had anything to do with Meg's roasted lamb chop getting high marks yesterday. Angelina's situation was somewhat similar to Meg's. Her selection of ingredients was quite chaotic, and so far, no judge could determine what dish she wanted to cook. Of course, this was also her specialty. Before she really completed this dish, no one knew if she would turn a pheasant into a phoenix. As time passed, the aroma of the braised fish gradually slipped out of the pot, attracting covetous gazes. Tucker Hotel, which had thousands of years of history and heritage, had always been regarded as one of the top restaurants in the underground city. As the head chef, Julian also had a very high status in the culinary world. To be able to join Tucker Hotel and become Julian's direct disciple, Iman's talent could be imagined. The so-called braised rainbow fish was a common name. This dish was called rainbow fish in Tucker Hotel and was priced at 500,000 copper coins per serving. It couldn't be ordered in the restaurant, so it had to be pre-ordered in advance. This was one of the signature dishes of Tucker Hotel, so the live broadcast video had some confidentiality on the details of the cooking process. This was also the reason why Julian could let this dish appear in the competition. He even brought out the signature dish of Tucker Hotel. Master Julian, your disciple is determined to get a place in the finals. David looked at Julian with a smile. If he learns well, he should be a place in the finals. If he doesn't learn well, there's nothing to say about him not being on the list, said Julian calmly. Well said, Old Heng said in a sarcastic tone. The judges wanted to laugh, but they had to hold it in for Julian's sake. Julian's words were indeed good. If Iman made it to the finals, it meant that he had learned well, and it was also because he taught him well. If Iman didn't make it to the finals, it was because he didn't learn well. What did it have to do with Julian? Julian snorted softly and didn't argue with Old Hunter. At this moment, Pata's golden roast lamb leg was becoming more and more golden in the transparent oven. The aroma of the roast lamb slowly drifted over, faintly competing with the fragrance of the fish. Nancy's nose twitched, and he shook his head slightly. Although the aroma of the roast lamb was strong, it was completely incomparable to the lamb chop that Hades had roasted yesterday. The layers of aroma created by the seasoning were beyond his reach. Moreover, card-copying charcoal roast lamb chop dominated the trending search list yesterday. Everyone from ordinary people to first-tier food bloggers participated in it, forming a shocking trend of checking in. This had never happened in the past few years of the King of Cooks competition. This also gave Nancy some new ideas. Delicious food made with ordinary ingredients was closer to life for more people, and it would make them resonate and have the desire to try it. In the eyes of ordinary people, the golden roast lamb leg was an ingredient that was impossible to buy, but even ordinary people could eat it occasionally. Perhaps Patas felt that he had found the secret to wealth through inspiration, but he didn't know that if he brought out a similar dish, he would be more likely to make a fool of himself. Angelina was the one who attracted the most attention. Angelina, who had brought a cart full of vegetarian dishes, placed a huge mountain of meat on a huge plate. Thick steak, sliced roast chicken, strips of lamb chops. They were piled up into a mountain of meat, and it was a spectacular sight. Wow, my God! Is this the legendary magician among chefs? Where did she make all this meat from? Oh my God, she made a pure meat dish with pure vegetarian dishes. This is amazing. She's an artist. It's a waste of her talent to be a chef. This is imitation meat, but it's so real that it can't be seen with the naked eye at all. The audience was shocked, and a large number of people flooded into Angelina's personal livestream. End of chapter. Chapter 2458. More than half of the time had passed. As Angelina and the other two contestants started to cook, the atmosphere gradually became tense. Ding! With a crisp, retro sound, Patas opened the oven and took out the golden lamb leg that was roasted until it was golden and shiny. The rich aroma of roasted lamb swept through the venue, attracting everyone's attention. The director also zoomed in on the lamb leg at the right time, giving it a perfect display. The lamb leg glowed with a faint oily sheen, as if it was shining gold. It shone brightly under the light. Vigorous golden goats rarely had any natural enemies on the grassland. Their vigorous speed allowed them to avoid most of the top predators, and this also resulted in their top-notch lamb leg. The color of this golden lamb leg is amazing. As expected of Mocha Mall, you can actually find such top-notch ingredients, and the price is much cheaper than expected, praised Dave, licking his sponsor's cheek without leaving a trace. Judging from its color and unique aroma, the quality of this golden leg of lamb is indeed extremely high. The value of the ingredients is reflected in all aspects, and it's indeed not something that ordinary lamb can compare to. This is also a test of a chef's ability to choose ingredients. Arya nodded as he intentionally glanced in Mag's direction. These words were more or less targeted, and the judges' faces showed a hint of playfulness. Almost at the same time, Iman's rainbow fish was also out of the pot. The moment the lid was lifted, the bright colors of the rainbow made everyone's eyes light up. The exquisite plate presentation raised the beauty of the dish to another level. Patas and Iman raised their hands one after another to signal that they had finished cooking. A whole golden roasted lamb leg was placed on a retro wooden plate, and the edges were decorated with a little green vegetables. It set off the main character to the greatest extent, and was quite visually impactful. Iman's rainbow fish, on the other hand, was exquisitely decorated. The half-meter-long rainbow fish was embellished, and coupled with the fish's beautiful fur, it looked as if it was covered in a layer of colorful light. It was dreamy and breathtaking. Meg took the time to look at their dishes. There was nothing much to say about Pata's golden roasted lamb leg. It was a seemingly perfect dish made with precision kitchen utensils. In other words, it was fine as long as one had hands. Other than the fact that the ingredients themselves were precious, the entire roasting process, be it the seasoning or the technique, was not very competitive. Obviously, this young man wanted to continue the popularity of his roast lamb chops from yesterday. Perhaps he thought that he could get a high score from the judges by choosing a top-notch lamb leg. Iman's 7-colored rainbow fish caught his attention. Whether it was the overall presentation or the fragrance, it was much better than yesterday's steamed fish. Amy should like it. After all, it's a rainbow fish. I can bring them a few when I go back. Meg was already thinking about the local specialties he would bring back. The rules of the competition remained the same. Those who finished first would go up on stage to be tasted and commented by the judges. Patas's roasted lamb leg was first on the big wheel. The judges praised the golden lamb leg, but they didn't show much interest or recognition for this dish. At the scene, the judges were either top chefs or well-known food critics. This level of roast lamb leg was not surprising at all. Whether it was the aroma or the cooking process, it could not be compared to Meg's charcoal roast lamb chop yesterday. The judges knew what Patas was thinking. Although they didn't point it out, they couldn't praise it either. The staff cut the lamb leg into small portions and presented them to the judges. The judges tasted them separately, and most of them said some pretty words that didn't matter. If none of you are going to say it, then I will. Contestant Patas, your roast lamb leg looks pretty good. The golden lamb leg is indeed very suitable for roasting. It's also a very classic method. Old Hunter put down the fork in his hand and looked at Patas with a serious expression. However, this method of roasting can be found in any restaurant that has roasted lamb legs. The only difference is that you're using a rare golden lamb leg. It can be said very clearly that this golden roast lamb leg didn't surprise me at all. The overly ordinary seasoning even made me feel that you wasted this high-quality lamb leg. Patas, who originally thought that he did well, suddenly had an ugly expression. His lips moved, and he chose to remain silent. Yes, the taste of this roast lamb leg is extremely ordinary. Because it wasn't marinated properly, there is an obvious layer of flavor. This is very bad. Nancy only took a small bite before putting down her fork and knife. She said with an indifferent expression, "There is still half an hour. If this time was used to marinate a thick lamb chop, there would definitely be a different result. Although the first dish to be presented might get a higher score because there is no comparison, the chef's attitude towards this dish is what the judges value." Nancy's evaluation made Potaz's face pale. He knew Nancy's identity and right to speak. This evaluation was equivalent to directly shutting him out of the finals. As expected, the judges gave a score. Potaz's score was only 75, which directly broke the lowest score of the previous semifinals. Potaz stood to the side with an ashen face. This score was a disgrace. Not only did it make it impossible for him to enter McCarthy Manor, it would also have some negative effects on his future path as a celebrity. Iman's throat rolled, and his expression became a bit nervous. The judges today seemed very strict, and even Miss Nancy, who usually didn't judge the contestants, gave such a harsh evaluation. It was a bit scary. Wow, I feel that Miss Nancy is super strict today. Those who are slacking off will probably be killed directly. I still like old Mr. Hunter's style of commenting. If he doesn't like it, just say it directly. He's not like the other judges who care about their faces and don't want to offend people. This competition has suddenly entered the semi-final stage. Who will be eliminated? It still feels very suspenseful. The audience's interest was aroused by this wave of surprise, and the bullet screen increased by a lot. The golden roast lamb leg was taken down, and only a small piece was eaten. Iman's rainbow fish was brought up on stage next. This was the famous signature dish of Tucker Hotel. Only VIP guests would order this dish, and it was personally cooked by Julian. It could be considered the most famous dish on the stage of this season's Chef King competition. This dish was the last dish in Julian and Iman's original plan. It could be used as the main dish in the finals. Since Hades, the dark horse, was too strong, to be safe, it was used in the semifinals. To be honest, this is the first time I've seen this rainbow fish with my own eyes. Although it's a baby version, it looks really amazing, David praised as he watched the fish slowly move in front of him. It's all Master Julian's fault for setting the price of this dish too high. A fish that costs 500,000 yuan is really unaffordable, a judge said with a smile. Although the rainbow fish was famous, due to its high price, even with the qualifications of the judges present, Nancy was probably the only one who had personally tasted it because of its high price. It looks like it's done well. The knife skills are exquisite, and the plate presentation is exquisite, Old Hunter nodded and said. After the presentation, the staff took the fish from different positions and put it in front of the judges for them to taste and comment. Old Hunter picked up a piece of fish meat and put it into his mouth. His eyes lit up slightly. Cece savored it and swallowed it. Then he picked up a piece of fish belly meat and put it into his mouth. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly. Finally, he picked up a piece of meat near the fish head and put it into his mouth. His eyes were already squinting, showing a hint of intoxication. This fish meat is indeed of the highest quality. It's smooth and delicate when it enters the mouth, and with a slight spin on the tip of the tongue, it slips down the throat unconsciously. Only extreme freshness is left in the mouth. Especially the fish head meat, it can be said to be the best of the best. The taste is extremely fresh and contains the essence of the body. With a light bite, I almost bit the tip of my tongue. Old Hunter looked at Iman with a face full of praise. The taste is just right. It doesn't hide the freshness of the fish. To be more precise, it made the taste even better. Thank you. Iman let out a big sigh of relief. Old Hunter and his master didn't get along well on the show. He didn't expect Old Hunter to give him such a good review. It's not easy to get a good review from Old Hunter. But as he said, this rainbow fish is really amazing. It's true that a great teacher produces a great disciple. This is the best fish in this year's King of Cooking competition. David put down his chopsticks and gave Iman a thumbs up. Iman humbly bowed to express his thanks. Although he tried to control his expression, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. Julian also looked at Iman with a gratified expression. He felt even more proud when he heard the judges praising his disciple. If nothing unexpected happened, Iman had already gotten one of the spots in the finals. Nancy only tasted a piece of fish head meat before putting down her chopsticks with an expressionless face. As a person who had eaten authentic rainbow fish at Tucker Grand Hotel more than once, Iman's baby fish could only be considered average. However, his basic skills were quite solid. It wouldn't be long before he could cook this dish at Tucker Grand Hotel. Of course, this level of skill wasn't enough to make her want to bring it to McCarthy Manor. There was obviously a better master there. If she really wanted to eat rainbow fish at home, all she needed was a phone call to Julian's business alliance. Why would she need to call his disciple back? The judges' high praise gave Iman a score of 93, which was quite high in the King of Cooking competition. I didn't get 95? Iman was a little disappointed. However, this was the highest score he had ever received in the Chef King competition. He was still a little unconvinced that he could not surpass the score of Hades's charcoal roast lamb chop yesterday. However, after deducting the points proportionally and adding 9 points to his park value, he got 92. 7 points, which was much higher than yesterday's score. Iman smiled when he saw the final score. Angelina's threat was still there. After all, he had full PK value. However, Hades was different. Although his online PK value had skyrocketed compared to yesterday, it was currently only about 7 points. According to the current score, if Hades wants to surpass Iman, he'll have to get more than 96 points from the judges. Iman did amazingly well today. I think it'll be difficult for Hades and Angelina to beat him. It seems that Angelina is almost done, but I still can't figure out what dish Hades is going to make. I think he might be going to make a pot of shrimp and beef puree? 25,632 times. Is this man's hand a mechanical arm? At this moment, the number of viewers in the main live stream of the Chef King tournament had exceeded 1.6 billion, and the 7-colored rainbow fish was quite eye-catching. Meg was still beating his beef calmly. The bright red beef had already turned into a puree. It was sticky but didn't lose its texture. He continued to beat it for more than 20,000 times, and it was coming to an end. 26,800 times. This was the number of beatings for the bursting beef meatball in Culinary God. Meg decided to beat it according to this number. On the other hand, Angelina had finished cooking. When she rang the small bell on the table, she looked back in Meg's direction with a hint of worry in her eyes. Iman got a very high score. Although he was quite confident in himself, he couldn't help but worry about Meg. In the Chef King tournament, it was quite difficult to convince 10 judges at the same time. The camera zoomed in on Angelina's result. It was an exquisitely constructed but rugged mountain of meat. Various kinds of meat were stacked into a small hill. The colorful meat was mouth-watering. She made a mountain of meat with a bunch of vegetables. As expected of Angelina, said Dave as he passed by the mountain of meat. David looked at the mountain of meat passing by in front of him with an expression of admiration on his face. Even after observing it closely, I can't tell the difference between it and real meat. Even the aroma of meat has been successfully replicated. This ingenious mind and skill is indeed very creative. This is the first time I've seen the on-site cooking of vegetarian imitation meat. The younger generation will surpass us in time, praised Old Hunter. It was another face-slapping scene that left a deep impression. When everyone thought that she was going to cook a vegetarian dish, she ended up cooking a meat dish with a vegetarian dish. The judges showed great interest in Angelina's dish and praised it. Compared to Iman's perfect performance, that was the rainbow fish created by Ariya, after all. As his direct disciple, his performance wasn't very surprising. However, Angelina left enough suspense when she bought the ingredients. In the end, the mountain of meat that she presented completely exceeded everyone's expectations. She was like an artist, and everyone was amazed. This girl is interesting. I've played with her for a while. Meg looked at the mountain of meat with surprise in his eyes. If Angelina behaved normally, he would definitely give her a few more compliments. But this girl's brain seemed a little strange. Was she an idol? End of chapter. Chapter 2459. Not only does this vegetarian imitation chicken drumstick look similar in appearance, its taste is even comparable to that of the phoenix from yesterday. Although one can find traces of the original ingredients after carefully tasting it, it's still very hard to imagine that this is a meat dish made entirely from vegetables. David ate a drumstick and sighed. This technique and creativity is really amazing. I've said this more than once. Angelina will definitely become a chef who won't lose to any of the masters here in the future. She always surprises me with her creativity. This ability is unique among the younger generation of chefs. Old Hunter ate a piece of mutton and was also full of praise. I've seen many chefs who are good at making vegetarian imitation meat, and I have a few friends who are good at it. But I think Angelina's limit will definitely be higher than theirs in the future. This height has nothing to do with technique, it's completely determined by her aesthetic talent, praised a female judge. The judges didn't hide their admiration and praise for Angelina. Their evaluation of her was obviously higher than that of Iman. Compared to Iman, who has a good master, the judges really prefer Miss Angelina, who has her own creativity. Iman's current limit may not reach Julian's level, but the judges see endless possibilities in Angelina. I feel like Iman has suddenly become a little dangerous. I wonder how many points she'll get. She scored full marks in the competition. As the judges began to count down, the audience's curiosity was piqued. When the countdown ended, the judges' scores and the total score appeared on the big screen. Angelina judges score, 94. Total score, 94. 6. Temporary first place. There was a burst of exclamations in the audience. It's here! The highest score of this year's Cooking King competition. This score can be ranked among the top in previous Cooking King competitions. As expected of the popular contestant, the judges' score is also higher than Iman's. The bullet screen was flooded with comments, expressing their shock at the score. Iman secretly clenched her fists. Although she was a little unconvinced, she still maintained a calm smile on her face. Angelina looked at her score and couldn't hide the joy on her face. She bowed slightly to the judges to express her gratitude, but her eyes quickly turned to Meg. The three contestants had finished cooking one after another. Now, only Meg was left on the stage. The cameras and the audience's eyes were all on Meg. After the last strike, Meg put down the iron rod in his hand. He scooped up the beef that had been beaten into a pile of minced meat and put it into a big bowl. He then added all kinds of spices and seasonings and kneaded them. After removing the fat, tendons, and bones from the delicate and smooth meat paste, with a light pinch, a plump little ball protruded from between the fingers. It was the perfect state. Mag took out the frozen prawn sauce from the freezer and made a few quick cuts on the plate with a small knife. The prawn sauce was then divided into many small square pieces. He poured warm water into the pot to maintain the temperature. Then, he started to make the explosive pissing meatballs. He grabbed the minced beef with one hand and squeezed a meatball slightly bigger than his thumb from between his thumb and index finger. He gently poked a hole with his finger and stuffed a shrimp paste into it. With a flick of his finger, he smoothed out the hole. The spoon was like a knife between the thumb and the index finger. The round meatball drew a beautiful parabola and gently fell into the pot without splashing water. The Filipino team called him an expert. The series of movements was smooth. Meg held the minced beef in one hand and a spoon in the other. The bright red meatballs almost formed a line in the air and fell into the pot. Is this an acrobatic performance? How can it be so smooth? David couldn't help but get up and move closer. Is he making meatballs? But why did he wrap the frozen shrimp paste in the meatballs? Old Hunter was puzzled. Let's not talk about other things. It's very pleasing to the eye. The female judge next to him had a look of appreciation. Interesting. More than 20,000 times of hammering just to make a meatball? Nancy looked at Meg, who was like an acrobatic master. She smiled and looked forward to it. Maybe he could bring her some new surprises other than the grilled lamb chop. For example, this complicated and strange meatball? It's hard for something so flashy to be elegant. Iman looked at Mag without much worry. If it was just meatballs, he didn't think Meg could beat him. The beef was just ordinary beef, and the shrimp paste was also very ordinary whitewater shrimp. What could he use to beat him? With his acrobatic skills? Brother Justice is awesome. This technique is going to kill all the bloggers in the flipping section. I've eaten meatballs with stuffing, but why did the stuffing have to be frozen first? Newcomer, may I ask if this is the live broadcast of the Chef King tournament? Although I still don't know what he's doing, it doesn't stop me from saying, Brother Justice is awesome. The audience was also a little shocked by Mag's operation. They were a little confused by the repetitive hammering earlier, but the skill of rolling the balls made them feel invigorated. The meatballs in the pot were quickly shaped in the warm water. The round meatballs looked quite cute. Compared to the long hammering time, the meatball rolling time was short and fast. In just a short while, a big lump of beef paste became meatballs floating in the pot. Meg washed his hands and turned off the fire. He scooped up the shaped meatballs from the warm water and put them into the beef bone broth. Meg's strange method of making meatballs successfully attracted the attention of the judges and the audience. Compared to the other contestants' cooking, his cooking was more complicated and more pleasing to the eye. Time passed quickly. Meg turned off the fire and opened the lid. A serving of bursting pissing meatballs was done. The round meatballs were spinning in the soup pot. The fragrance of the beef bone broth came out with the heat. It wasn't strong, but it was fragrant enough. Meg scooped 4 meatballs in a small bowl and added a spoon of broth. He looked at the judges and said, "These are bursting pissing whitewater meatballs. Please have a taste." The staff came forward and brought 10 servings of bursting pissing meatballs to the judges' table. There was no plate. Once it was out of the pot, it was divided into small portions and brought to the judges' table. This method was also quite rare in the Chef King competition. David scooped up a meatball with a spoon and shook his head. Although the whole cooking process is quite strange, this bursting pissing whitewater meatball looks ordinary. There's nothing special about it, whether it's the fragrance or the discomfort. End of chapter. Chapter 2460. The camera slowly zoomed in, but no matter how hard the photographer tried, he still couldn't make this bowl of plain-looking beef meatballs look tempting. David's evaluation was very pertinent. At least on the surface, the meatballs didn't have any special shapes and had an ordinary aroma. They couldn't be compared to Iman and Angelina's creations at all. In fact, they were far inferior to Pata's golden roasted lamb leg. The judges were somewhat disappointed. They had thought that Hades, who had brought them a great surprise yesterday, would bring something different today. However, it seemed that this was not the case. It was just that Nancy seemed to be very interested in him yesterday. They thought that he would be the chosen one and the big dark horse of this competition and enter the finals together with Angelina. But now, with his performance, it was hard for them to go easy on him even if they wanted to. There was a slight smile at the corner of Julian's mouth. Iman had entered the finals and tomorrow was the last battle. As long as he used his trump card, the championship of this year's King of Cooks competition would basically be in his hands. That's it? It looks a little disappointing. A victorious smile appeared on Iman's face. Hades, who had always been on guard against him, had unexpectedly pulled him down in the semifinals. This meatball looked like the standard of a roadside stall. How could it compare to him? This meatball is much more complicated than yesterday's roasted lamb chop. Brother Hades must have hidden something in it, right? Angelina's hand grabbed the corner of her clothes nervously. She turned to look at Hades, but her heart was full of expectations. What is it? Because he completed the goal in advance, he doesn't plan to continue the competition? Keeping a low profile is not a bad strategy. Maybe he can enter McCarthy Manor a day earlier. She pondered. Damn, this meatball is a little lame. I feel like Brother Justice is going to have to say goodbye. I feel like barbecue is his strong suit. Why did he have to make meatballs today? If he had a golden roasted lamb leg, he should be able to enter the finals smoothly, right? The judges haven't tasted it yet. There's no need to jump to conclusions. Maybe soon the taste is worse. The audience was also a little disappointed with Meg's meatballs. After all, The charcoal roasted lamb chop yesterday was amazing enough, and everyone's expectations were high. However, the meatballs now seemed to be far from their expectations. Most people believed that Meg had no chance and might even get an extremely low score. Only Meg remained calm. He didn't explain or argue, only waiting for the judges to taste it. Some things, if you don't try it yourself, it's useless to say anything. Nancy looked at Meg, then looked down at the small bowl in front of her. 4 meatballs were floating in the pure white beef bone broth. The surface of the meatballs was smooth, and their sizes were almost exactly the same. It was as if they had been standardized by a machine. One had to know that Hades had used his hands to create them one by one. There were a few green onions floating on the surface of the soup. Together with the round meatballs, it looked a little fresh. Seeing the finished product, Nancy was also a little disappointed. However, seeing Meg's calm appearance, she couldn't help but be a little curious. What secrets were hidden in the meatballs that made him so confident? Or was it because he had already gotten a pass to McCarthy Manor, so he was letting himself go on the field? If that was the case, then she might have to reconsider yesterday's decision. The most important thing in a dish is still the taste. Nancy scooped up a meatball with a spoon. The fresh taste of the beef greeted her. It was a very pure fragrance. Then she opened her cherry mouth and gently took a bite of the meatball. Puff! It was the sound of an explosion. Like a balloon full of water being punctured, the fragrant soup spurted out of the small mouth and exploded in Nancy's mouth. Hot! The slightly hot soup frightened the taste buds on the tip of the tongue. However, the fresh fragrance that followed greatly comforted the taste buds. It was the ultimate freshness and sweetness. It blended into the soup like the spring wind and rain, nourishing the frightened taste buds. For the first time, she found that the whitewater shrimp was so fresh and sweet, and the fragrance of the beef mixed in it made the taste buds on the tip of the tongue crazy. Nancy's expression almost went out of control when she saw the soup spurt out of her mouth and the unexpected fragrance of the soup. However, as a professionally trained socialite, she must strictly control her expression and state in the live broadcast watched by more than 1 billion people. After a series of anxious and restrained expression changes, Nancy, who gently pursed her lips, couldn't help but let out a soft hum. The judges were paying attention to Nancy, who was the first to taste the meatball. When they heard this sound, their expressions suddenly became a little strange. Miss Nancy rarely lost her composure on the stage. How could she lose her composure in front of this small meatball? Nancy's pretty face turned red. She had been very restrained and even used some skills to suppress her expression, but the instinctive reaction of her body was too strong, making her lose part of her resistance. Nancy glanced at Meg's direction with a little resentment. This guy actually played tricks in the meatball and didn't warn her in advance. Fortunately, she only took a small bite, and the spilled soup was limited. Otherwise, she didn't know how to end it. It was just that the soup was so fresh and delicious that it had completely aroused her appetite. The feeling of being moved was not felt by the previous 4 dishes. Without waiting for a long time, she gently blew at the meatball with her small mouth, and then carefully put the whole meatball into her mouth. This time, she learned to be smart and gently bit into the meatball. The remaining gravy flowed gently in her mouth, but the tender and smooth texture of the meatball amazed her. After being hammered for tens of thousands of times, the beef had become incomparably delicate, but it was precisely because of this special method of hammering that allowed the beef to preserve its muscle fibers extremely well. While it was delicate, it still retained its chewy texture. The pure meatball infinitely magnified the original taste of the beef. It was so charming. At that moment, she seemed to have come to the grassland and seen a herd of strong bison running past. It was the fragrance of the grass, the breath of freedom. The collision of the whitewater shrimp and the beef made the ultimate fresh and sweet taste burst in her mouth in an instant. Her taste buds were wildly agitated, making her feel a great impact. One of the shoulder straps of Nancy's dress was torn, and the dress slipped down a little, revealing her delicate collarbone. The scene was shocked, and Johnson jumped up directly. Chapter 2461. Nancy tasted the bursting white-water beef meatball, and her shoulder straps actually broke. Such a strong reaction shocked everyone present. Johnson, who had jumped to his feet, turned even paler. An accident on the show was nothing, but if Miss Nancy exposed herself on the show and was watched live by more than 1 billion people, he would really be torn apart. Oh my God! Did he put a bomb in the meatball? Fortunately, it's only the shoulder straps that broke. It's a pity that it's only the shoulder straps that broke. What made a proud girl lose her composure repeatedly? Is it the distortion of human nature, or is the meatball just too delicious? The netizens also had a huge reaction. It looked like an ordinary meatball, so why did Nancy have such a strong reaction when she tasted it? Nancy had always been cold and aloof, and her temperament was perfect for her identity as a rich lady. So, the problem should be with this meatball. The audience couldn't help but wonder what secret this meatball hid that could make Nancy lose her composure on the show. This can't be right? Iman's emotions suddenly became a little complicated. Nancy's reaction was too strong, and it was completely different from the indifferent look she had when she tasted the 3 of them earlier. This made him have an ominous premonition, just like yesterday's grilled lamb chop. She actually broke Miss Nancy's shoulder straps. It seems that there's really no need to worry at all. Angelina was deep in thought, and her smile brightened a little. Nancy was immersed in the enjoyment brought by the juicy meatball. It wasn't until she swallowed the meatball and opened her eyes that she realized that her shoulder straps had broken. Fortunately, this dress had been designed with unexpected situations in mind, so it was only the shoulder straps that broke. The dress didn't slide down, and there were no more embarrassing situations. However, this was already embarrassing for Nancy. She had never lost her composure in front of others, let alone in a live broadcast with more than 1 billion people watching. As a socialite who had undergone all kinds of advanced training since childhood, although Nancy was embarrassed, she didn't show it on her face. Her slender fingers gently picked up the broken shoulder straps, and a small spell glued them back together. At the same time, she smiled and said, "Even my clothes were shocked by the deliciousness of this meatball. Mr. Hades brought me another surprise and a little shock." As she spoke, she glanced at Meg with some resentment. Meg's eyes were clear and innocent, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. The judges were deep in thought. Miss Nancy's words set the tone for Hades's dish. Since yesterday, Miss Nancy had shown great interest and extra care for Hades. He didn't know if this bursting white water beef meatball was really as delicious as she said, or if she was just deliberately showing it to let Hades get a good result. "Let me have a taste. I want to see if this meatball is as fake as Miss Nancy said." Old Hunter scooped up a meatball and put it into his mouth. The meatball exploded in his mouth, and the soup splattered everywhere. It was so hot that he wanted to spit it out. How was this a surprise? This was simply a shock. However, the deliciousness of the broth immediately bloomed. The fresh and sweet whitewater prawn sauce with a bit of oily fragrance comforted the frightened taste buds, blooming with a surprising fresh taste. Old Hunter, who didn't have high expectations, was shocked. So this is the so-called bursting whitewater beef meatball. He used the broth after cooking the pork skin and added the prawn sauce to condense it into jelly, then wrapped it in the meatball. During the cooking process, the jelly melted and became the surprise hidden in the meatball. Old Hunter's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but want to applaud Hades's ingenious idea. After the broth, he carefully chewed the meatball. The texture of the meatball also surprised him. One had to know that they had seen Meg pound the beef tens of thousands of times, turning it into a pile of minced beef, and then squeezing it into a meatball. Therefore, he didn't have high expectations for the meatball's texture from the beginning. However, reality gave him a slap in the face. The meatball's texture was simply amazing. It was delicious and chewy, and the texture was even better than fresh beef. Moreover, during the hammering process, the fascia and fat were removed, making the meat extremely delicate and smooth. The more one chewed, the more delicious it was. It was simply a kind of fascinating enjoyment. Rip. 2 of Old Hunter's tight-fitting shirt's buttons burst open, and his back was directly torn open. "I understand now." Old Hunter's face was filled with joy. He looked at Meg and said, Since the meat was hammered and not cut, the muscle fibers of the beef were not cut, so the texture of the beef was retained, right? Meg nodded. A very genius idea. Old Hunter gave Meg a thumbs up and praised, "This is the dish that gave me the biggest surprise of the day. The combination of beef and prawn is unexpectedly perfect." Old Hunter's comment made the judges' expectations for the meatball even higher. One had to know that Old Hunter was the most ruthless of the judges. Regardless of the person, just the dish in front of him was enough to make him give such a high evaluation. It was obvious that the meatball brought him a great surprise. It tore the clothes of two judges. "This meatball is too awesome. The situation seems to be turning around. Don't tell me that Brother Justice is going to rely on this ordinary meatball to enter the finals? What are these judges talking about? Can't they be more professional? Let me try it too." So infuriating. The audience's expectations were raised by a few more points. On the top floor of the Twin Towers building, Akali stared at the small bowl of meatballs on the screen. She slightly knit her brows as she said to herself, "Although I like my big brother Hades's looks, these meatballs don't look that tasty at all. Why did Nancy's clothes tear when she only ate one? Has she always been this sensitive?" Then, without turning her head, she ordered the secretary beside her, "Go and get me a bowl. Young miss, this." The secretary was a bit embarrassed. He only roasted 12 lamb chops yesterday, so it's fine if you can't get it. But today he cooked a large pot of meatballs and there's still half a pot left. If you can't even get this, then you can scram. Akali said in a cold voice. "I'll go now." The secretary quickly replied before quickly leaving. At the competition venue, Iman's forehead was already covered in sweat. After Nancy and Old Hunter tasted it, they both gave Hades's explosive whitewater meatball a high evaluation. It made him, who thought that he had already entered the finals, feel a bit of pressure. This kind of evaluation in the Chef King competition, he had never heard it from these two people before. Now he could only pray that the judge's evaluation of the meatball was different, preventing him from receiving a terrifying high score like yesterday. Chapter 2462. The juicy white water beef meatball received high praise from Nancy and Old Hunter. It was a new force to be reckoned with. The other judges also began to taste the meatball. Exclamations and cries of surprise rose and fell one after another. The sound of clothes tearing could be heard. It was a rare scene in the history of the Chef King competition. The meatball's appearance was completely different from its ordinary appearance. The taste of the juicy white water caught the judges off guard. Julian looked around and felt a little gloomy. The judges didn't seem to be in Iman's favor. What kind of secret was hidden in the meatball? He scooped up a meatball and looked at it carefully. He still couldn't see anything special about it. Then he put it into his mouth. Julian bit into the meatball. He felt like he had bitten an egg. The tender beef was cut open by his teeth, and the hot soup splashed in his mouth. Oh! Julian was shocked. He didn't expect the meatball to be filled with soup. He quickly realized that it was the white water shrimp jelly that Hades had wrapped in the meatball. He didn't expect it to have such a wonderful effect. The freshness of the shrimp jelly and the freshness of the beef jelly made the meatball taste better than he had expected. This dish was made with relatively cheap ingredients, but it was much more impactful than the previous 3 dishes made with expensive ingredients. As an old chef who had been cooking for hundreds of years and was one of the top few people in the industry, he had to admit that this explosive gravy white water beef meatball was really awesome. It was a dish that could be a signature dish in a restaurant. It only needed a little bit of effort on the plate. With Hades's age, if he didn't have a powerful master, he would be a genius among geniuses. Yesterday's charcoal grilled lamb chop and today's juicy white water beef meatball were all created by himself. Iman is in a bit of danger now. Julian's mood became heavier. Although he also wanted his favorite disciple to advance to the finals, Miss Nancy had shown great affection and recognition for Hades. It would inevitably affect the other judges' scores. Moreover, as a judge of the Chef King tournament for 3 years, he had a generous appearance fee and the fame that came with it, so he couldn't let his disciple win in the competition. Wrapping the beef meatballs with white shrimp paste is indeed very creative and pleasantly surprising. In terms of the choice of ingredients, they also brought out the best in each other. The most suitable is the best. This point is worth learning from all chefs. Julian put down his spoon and looked at the camera. However, there are many steps for a chef to complete a dish. In the end, the appearance of the dish will be presented to the diner first, which is the so-called plate presentation. In this regard, I think contestant Hades can continue to improve and make his dishes more visually appealing. Thank you. Meg smiled and nodded, but in his heart, he cursed the old fox. The other judges were full of praises, but Julian didn't find fault with the taste. Instead, he went along with the compliments and then found fault with the presentation. If it wasn't for the fact that he felt that it was troublesome to separate the dishes after admiring them, he could also carve 2 small flowers and place them on the table. He was sure that they would look good. I don't think there's a problem with the small bowl presentation. After all, not all restaurants are as grand as Tucker Hotel, where every dish has to be beautifully decorated, David said with a smile. In the streets and alleys of the west side of the city, there are many small restaurants, and the most common dish there is a small bowl. The dishes are small, but the taste is not bad. The presentation is not exquisite, but the taste is much better than many big restaurants. If you can eat a small bowl of steaming beef meatballs in the morning in winter, it would be wonderful. There's no need for the fancy presentation. I agree. A small bowl, sprinkle some chopped green onions, eat meatballs, and drink meat soup. It's not as tasty as the ones from the big bowl. Old Hunter followed. A professional gourmet like David knew more about food than he did. All the judges nodded their heads in agreement at his words. Nancy finished 4 beef meatballs in small bites and drank up the beef bone soup in the bowl. Only then did she realize that she was full. Today's meal had been arranged clearly by Hades. She thought that she had found a master of barbecue, but now it seemed that he was also a master of rolling meatballs. This master was right. Director, the number of people online has exceeded 2 billion. The assistant's voice sounded in the headset. Johnny's eyes lit up, and he opened his bracelet to take a look at the live broadcast room. Sure enough, the number of people in the main live broadcast room of the Chef King competition had just exceeded 2 billion, reaching a historical peak. And this was also the peak in the history of the Micropush live broadcast room. The Hades incident, together with the previous incident of Nancy's shoulder girdle collapse, brought a terrifying amount of traffic to the program team. This kid is really a blessing. Johnny's eyes were shining as he looked at Hades. Yesterday, he was still feeling sorry for Jasper's withdrawal from the competition. Looking at it now, it was a great thing. Otherwise, how could this Chef King competition, which was criticized as the most boring competition, be so popular? I have to let him enter the finals. Johnny rolled his eyes and quickly typed a line of words on his bracelet and sent it out. The judge's evaluation of Hades's explosive white water beef meatball was as exciting as a roller coaster. From the initial low expectations of its appearance to the shock of tasting it, it could be said that it was full of twists and turns, which also made the audience's mood fluctuate. However, Iman and Angelina both got very high scores and maintained a certain lead over Hades in the online competition. This also made it uncertain whether Hades could make a comeback and enter the finals again. Okay, the judges have finished tasting and gave a very high evaluation of Hades's explosive white water beef meatball. Will he be able to perform the miracle of a comeback like yesterday? Let's invite our live judges to start giving their scores. The host said loudly, and a 15-second countdown appeared behind the judges. The scene suddenly quieted down, and everyone quietly watched the big screen that was ticking down. Iman clenched his fists tightly, cold sweat sliding down his forehead and the tip of his nose to the ground. He never thought that Hades's ugly meatball would be such a big threat to him. If he's also eliminated, it doesn't feel so bad. Patas glanced at Iman, revealing a gloating smile. He was already sure that he would be eliminated anyway, but if he could see Iman, who was usually quite arrogant because his master was a judge, being eliminated, he would feel a little better. However, this guy who came out of nowhere was really strong. The judges were full of praise for him in 2 consecutive rounds. This was a scene that had never happened in the entire season. End of chapter. Chapter 2463. As the countdown ended, Hades' score was displayed on the big screen under the nervous attention of the audience and the audience in front of the screen. Judges' score, 96. Online PK score, 7. Total score, 93. The scene was silent for a moment before it attracted a burst of exclamations. The judge's score of 96 was dazzling and dazzling. More importantly, his total score was higher than Iman's and he was ranked second, successfully advancing to the finals. 96 points. This judge's score is incredible. So strong. I thought 95 was the upper limit, but it's just the beginning. As expected of my brother Justice, he's unparalleled. The screen was filled with words of Brother Justice's awesomeness, so the audience's mood was clear. Iman's face turned pale and his body swayed, almost falling down. He thought that victory was in his hands, but he never thought that Hades would actually get a high score of 96 points, surpassing him by a small margin to become second place. 96 points, this was the highest score in this year's King of Cooks competition. Yesterday's score of 95 points was shocking enough. But who would have thought that this seemingly ordinary meatball could go one step further? Julian slightly knit his brows and it was hard to hide the surprise in his eyes. In order for Iman to advance, he only gave Hades 8 points, which meant that at least 7 judges gave Hades a full score. Of course, Hades was a new force to be reckoned with. He was the #1 dark horse in this year's King of Cooks competition. His performance in 2 consecutive competitions had suppressed the audience, so it was not hard to understand why the judges liked him. If it wasn't for the fact that he had only joined the program for a short time and his online PK score was relatively low, even Angelina would not be able to suppress his limelight. Nancy's lips curled slightly. He was indeed the man she liked, always bringing surprises to people. Based on Johnson's feedback, the results of this semifinals were excellent and Meg deserved the most credit. Brother Hades is so great. On the top floor of the Twin Towers, Akali jumped up from the sofa and looked at Hades on the screen with sparkling eyes. He's handsome, knows how to cook, and is so good at acting. This is simply the template of a main character. I definitely can't miss this kind of man. After coming to the dungeon, did he specially develop a new dish for this competition? She looked at Meg, who seemed to be emitting a dazzling light on the stage, as if she was looking at a monster. Although she wasn't a regular customer of Amy's, she was certain that the 2 dishes that appeared in these 2 matches weren't on the menu. And judging from the performance and scores of the 10 professional judges on the scene, this was definitely not a perfunctory work created at the last minute. What surprised she even more was that Meg, who was cooking on stage, was indeed enjoying the process. He was the most powerful being on the Norland continent, a super powerful being who was on the verge of becoming a transcendent, and he was serious about being a chef. Amazing! Angelina looked at Meg with a fangirl look in her eyes. It was another record for this year's Chef King tournament. Moreover, she guessed that Master Iman might have been involved in this as well. Otherwise, the score would have been even higher. Thank you. Meg smiled and nodded. He didn't seem too surprised by this result. Indeed, this did not meet his expectations. He had thought that he would be able to get full marks. After all, this was an improved version of the explosive pissing beef meatball. It would be too much not to give him full marks since he had swung the iron rod 26,000 times, right? However, this result was barely enough. At least he had advanced to the finals. By this time tomorrow, his online PK score should be around 9 points. When that time came, he would have a final showdown with Angelina, and it would be a contest of strength. Okay, with the final score of contestant Hades, the semifinals have come to a successful end. Angelina and Hades are in first and second place with 94, 6 and 93, 4 points respectively. They have advanced to the finals. Iman and Patas have contributed an exciting competition and delicious food. Unfortunately, they have lost and will bid farewell to the stage of our Chef King tournament. The host officially announced the results of the competition. Although Iman was dissatisfied, he still kept his composure and congratulated Hades and Angelina. Although it was a pity that he had to stop in the semifinals and had no chance to enter McCarthy Manor, he was still the apprentice of the head chef of Tucker Hotel and the future successor of the head chef. He also had a bright future. Congratulations, Hades. Hades, what? Will there be a miracle of getting full marks in the finals tomorrow? I feel like Hades is a treasure trove. Did the program crew do it on purpose? Did they hide him for so long before letting him come on as a substitute? I think the director's brain must be fried. How could they hide such a hot topic at the end of the show? The bullet screen was full of congratulatory messages for Hades advancing to the finals. Johnson looked at the number of viewers that exceeded the peak of 2.1 billion and burst into tears. He also felt that his brain must have been damaged. He didn't manage to discover a superstar like Hades in the beginning and almost caused the most boring Chef King tournament ever. Then came the emotional farewell of the two eliminated contestants. As the semifinalists, they had gained great popularity in the Chef King tournament. After bidding farewell to the competition, whether they returned to being chefs or debuted as celebrities, they would have a bright future ahead of them. Meg and Angelina, on the other hand, received a round of praise from the judges as they had advanced to the finals. After a round of pleasantries, the live broadcast that had caused a huge response in the underground city finally came to an end. Meg turned on his wristband as he walked off the stage. There was still a final tomorrow. After that, Nancy should arrange for him to go to McCarthy Manor. Before that, he still had something to do. Mr. Hades? A voice sounded behind him. Meg frowned slightly and turned to look at Angelina, who was standing behind him. But I want to invite you to have lunch together. Is that okay? Angelina bit her lower lip and said with a slightly red face. Woo, ding, the wristband vibrated slightly. Meg glanced at it and saw that it was 2 messages. Mr. Hades, let's have afternoon tea together. Nancy. Brother Hades, have lunch with me today. My car is downstairs, you must come. Akali said. This. Meg's frown deepened. Angelina saw that Meg's expression was dignified and she was a little nervous. She lowered her eyes slightly and her face was so red that it looked like blood was about to drip out. I'm sorry, I don't want to have any strange scandals during the competition. Next time. Meg shook his head and refused. This excuse? Tears welled up in Angelina's eyes. She bowed to Meg and said, I'm sorry. She quickly left. End of chapter. Chapter 2464. Angelina was pure, charming, full of energy, and could cook well. She was worthy of being called the goddess of the cooking world. However, Meg still preferred girls like Nancy and Akali. Could beauty be used as food? Rich women could. Meg did not have the ability to give each of his sisters a warm home, so keeping a distance from the girls was his last bit of gentleness. No time, Meg coldly replied to Akali. He did not doubt that the McCarthy family would investigate him. If they found out that he had an ambiguous relationship with Akali, he would most likely be rejected. After all, the Dixon family and the McCarthy family had never been on good terms. This time, they had suffered a big setback because of the Horus incident. Meg was also wary of Akali. Although she acted like a fanatical young woman, it did not mean that she was a brainless woman. On the contrary, she was the smartest of the younger generation of the major tycoons in the underground city. Otherwise, how could she own one of the landmarks of Tucker City, the Twin Towers, at such a young age? Then he replied to Nancy with a short message, okay. A certain degree of alienation was the secret to keeping a woman interested and curious about you. It was not a joke to lick until you had nothing in the end. For a proud daughter like Nancy, she had been pampered since she was young and had countless licking dogs around her. At this time, the faintly discernible sense of alienation was more attractive to her. After all, he was the one and only chef. How was your performance? Meg and she walked out of the studio with a chuckle. It was amazing, she honestly said. She looked at Meg with a bit of scrutiny. She still could not figure out why Meg could be like a fish in water when it was his first time participating in a variety show. It could even be said that it was his first time coming into contact with the underground world. He could even stir up the entire underground world by himself. "How's the Horace incident going?" Meg asked telepathically. "You know, this kind of thing doesn't progress too fast." Meg nodded thoughtfully. Even though Horace's case had caused a storm on the internet, the final result was still a result of a game between various parties. It had little to do with justice. "Nancy asked me out for afternoon tea. After that, I plan to go out," Meg said. "You're going to kill Fergus?" She paused. "I have no intention of challenging the transcendence of your buried city." Meg shook his head calmly. "I just want to go shopping and buy some local specialties for my daughter and wife." She caught up with Meg and sternly said, "I have to remind you again. According to the agreement, you can't bring anything from the underground city back to the Norland continent." "Don't worry, I won't take your robots back. I'm just bringing them some beautiful handicrafts," Meg comforted. "He actually rejected me again." Akali, sitting on the sofa, saw Meg's short reply and her teeth itched with anger. In the underground city, there had never been a man who had rejected her again and again. He didn't even bother to write a reason. "Miss, the explosive whitewater beef meatballs you wanted." The secretary excitedly walked over with an incubator in her hand. "Let me try it and see if I can forgive him." Akali sat up. The secretary opened the incubator and the rich fragrance of beef wafted out. Although she had been watching the show on the sofa and hadn't stopped eating snacks, Akali couldn't help swallowing her saliva when she smelled this fragrance. There were 5 meatballs in the crystal bowl, which were round and smooth. Akali picked up a spoon and scooped up a meatball. She gently blew on it before putting it into her mouth. She bit down on it in one go. Brr! Akali couldn't help opening her mouth when she was scalded by the hot soup. The soup splattered all over the secretary's face. The secretary took 2 steps back in a daze and almost fell to the ground. Akali was also stunned. It was a good thing they were at home. If they were outside, she would have lost all her face. Then a sweet taste bloomed on the tip of her tongue. Her taste buds that had been frightened by the hot soup were suddenly comforted. The fresh shrimp was wrapped in the slightly sticky meat soup, bringing the sweetness of the sea. Adding in the fragrance of the beef, it instantly made people fall into it. She felt as if she was swimming in a blue ocean and running across a vast grassland. She was very happy. After the soup, there were the springy meatballs. Chewing them bit by bit, there was a wonderful taste that made it hard for her to imagine that this was beef that had been tempered thousands of times. As for the rich fragrance of the beef, it was completely released when she chewed. She had never eaten such a strange food before. It caught people off guard and made them fall into it. The secretary wiped the soup off her face and looked at Akali with a panicked expression. "Miss, I'll take it away now." Her heart was about to break. Who would have thought that the explosive white water beef meatballs that had conquered the judges of the Chef King competition would make the young miss vomit? She was definitely dead today. "Who told you to take it away?" Akali glared at the secretary before scooping up another meatball. "Go and change your clothes. I'll take it away after I finish eating." "Oh, all right." The secretary left in a daze. It seemed like the young miss liked it quite a bit. Meatballs came one after another, eating more and more. When the final meatball went down her stomach, Akali picked up the crystal bowl and drank all the soup. She licked her lips in satisfaction and revealed a faint smile. To be honest, this explosive white water beef meatball had far surpassed her expectations. It was no wonder Nancy treated him differently. She couldn't taste the roasted lamb chops yesterday, but today's meatballs allowed her to feel Hades' strength. This kind of outstanding man, not only did he have looks and a sense of justice, he could also make good food. If he was taken into Nancy's harem, she would never be able to eat his food again. No, this kind of thing definitely can't happen. This kind of outstanding man, I have to tightly hold on to him in my hands. Akali gritted her teeth with a determined look on her face. Submit Hades' information and have them finish the background check as soon as possible. After the competition tomorrow, I want to bring him back to the manor. Inside the office, Nancy gave this order to the secretary beside her. All right. The secretary nodded in response before quickly leaving the office. Roasted lamb chops, explosive white water beef meatballs. I want to know what kind of pleasant surprises you can bring me, Nancy said to herself with a faint smile. Hades's performance today made her even more certain that she would let him enter the Max Manor. But there were many rules in large clans, and they were even stricter when it came to chefs. Even if it was someone she recommended, they had to go through the family's investigation. This chapter ends. Chapter 2465. It's already the third day. When will father come back? I miss him. Amy sat on the steps outside the restaurant with her elbows on her knees and her chin in her hands. She squeezed her baby-fat cheeks to make them look even more round and cute, but her sigh had a bit of hidden bitterness. Annie was sitting next to her with an easel in front of her. Although she was facing the bustling Aden Square, there was only one person in the painting. Mag was busy cooking in the kitchen. He was cooking eggplant with garlic sauce, and there was a plate of red braised pork on the side. Amy turned to look at the painting, swallowed, and sighed again. I'm so hungry, sis. Have some candy. Little Guai jumped out of the restaurant on Ugly Duckling and squeezed between the two of them. She opened her little hands, and there were 2 rainbow candies in her palms. Little Guai is so obedient. Amy peeled off the wrapper and popped the candy into her mouth with a satisfied smile. It's so sweet. And also smiled as she picked up the rainbow candies from Little Guai's palms, peeled off the wrapper, and fed them to Little Guai. Big sister, and you can have some. I have a lot more. Little Guai shook her head as she took out another handful of rainbow candies from her pocket, and was slightly taken aback before she put the candy into her mouth with a smile. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who had been demoted from a pet shop to a steed, raised its head and meowed a few times. All right, I'll give you one too. Little Guai picked up a rainbow candy and was about to peel it for Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling wagged its tail, and its eyes narrowed with joy. Ugly Duckling, you're not allowed to eat candy. Amy's stern voice sounded. Little Guai immediately stopped what it was doing, and Ugly Duckling's expression collapsed as it looked at Amy with an aggrieved expression. Look at you, you're getting rounder and rounder. You're going to become a ball soon. But where are your wings? Where's your slender neck? Where's your swimming paws? Amy looked at Ugly Duckling with disappointment. When are you going to become a white swan like this? Meow. Ugly Duckling's ears drooped as it moved closer to Anne, and smiled as she rubbed its head and pinched its chubby cheeks. Then, she signaled Little Guai to put away the candy. Ugly Duckling was indeed too fat, and it had been secretly eating countless snacks with Little Guai during this period of time. Although the fat and round tangerine was very nice to touch and was very cute, it was true that candies could not be eaten anymore. It actually got fat from eating. How pitiful! Little Guai threw the candy into its mouth with a pitiful look on its face. Meow meow. Ugly Duckling fell to the ground and shut itself off. However, Ugly Duckling's wings are about to grow out. Look, the small wings are about to become big wings. Little Guai pointed at Ugly Duckling's back with a muffled voice. Amy pursed her lips and said, That's just a pair of small wings that have become fat wings. Let me take a look. When can they become real wings? Little Guai stroked Ugly Duckling's small wings with her little hand, and specks of golden light appeared on her fingertips before disappearing into the wing tattoo. It was as if a layer of gold had been tattooed on it. Ugly Duckling, which was lying on the ground with its head drooped, suddenly raised its head, and a golden light flashed through its blue eyes. It raised its head and let loose a roar. Meow, a pair of golden wings extended from Ugly Duckling's back, and the dazzling light was even more dazzling than the sun. Furthermore, the wings that had appeared this time were no longer soft and adorable. Instead, they were a pair of large wings with a wingspan of over a meter. Meow meow. Ugly Duckling turned to look at its wings with a dumbstruck expression, and was at a complete loss. Wow. It really is a pair of big wings. Amy's eyes lit up as she stroked them. They look like chicken wings. Anne's eyes were also glowing with excitement. Ugly duckling, hurry up and take me flying. I wanna fly. Fly high. Little Gwai urged as it pinched Ugly Duckling's ear. Ugly Duckling was a little dumbstruck, but it didn't dare to disobey Little Gwai's orders. It flapped its wings lightly and disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, it appeared 100 meters above the center of the Eden Square. So fast, Amy was a little surprised. Meanwhile, Anne switched to another piece of paper, and a pair of golden wings had already appeared on it. So, where did Mr. Mac find this little guy? On the second floor of the magic potion shop, Crassus took a sip of wine as he looked at Little Gwai, who was flying around on a fat flying cat, with a complex expression. Julian was silent for a moment before saying, I heard that the elven race underwent a mutation, and Irina took away a little elf. That's a little elf, but this little guy isn't a little elf. Crassus shook his head. However, a thought quickly occurred to him, and he turned to Julian with a complex expression. Do you think it's possible that she's also... How many people in this world do you think are capable of such a feat? Urian's voice lowered slightly. Crassus smiled. Even you and I can't do that. How many people in this world can? Then, both of them fell silent. I don't think I said anything about my last disciple, right? Crassus broke the silence after a long while. How dare you think about something like that? Aren't you afraid that you'll lead her astray? Julian pursed his lips with a mocking expression. Crassus smiled sheepishly and didn't retort, which was rare for him. Little Gwai was flying around the Eden Square on Ugly Duckling's back, and its golden wings were glowing, attracting a lot of attention. What's that? A cat that can fly? It should be some kind of magic beast. It's so fat and adorable. This cat looks so familiar. It looks like the one that belongs to little boss Mamie. But why does it have wings? There's a cute little fellow on the cat's back. Isn't that little boss Mamie's? But it looks so dangerous. People were looking up at it. They were amazed and worried at the same time. In the distance, the Grey Temple's patrols had already discovered the commotion. Chaos City had a no-fly rule, but when they saw a fat cat flying in the sky with a little lowly who looked only 1 or 2 years old riding on its back, and heard that it belonged to Mamie's family, their expressions became gentler. Gina walked out of the ice cream shop when she heard the news. She smiled helplessly when she saw Little Gwai flying in the sky. However, she still kept a straight face and sternly said, Little Gwai, come down. Don't mess around. Ugly Duckling, come down. Let's go eat ice cream. Little Gwai patted Ugly Duckling's head when it heard her. Ugly Duckling, which had already gotten used to flying, immediately changed its direction and dove towards the ice cream shop's entrance. Then, it landed on the ground, rolled a few times, and only stopped when it bumped into Gina's leg. Meanwhile, Little Gwai jumped down from Ugly Duckling before it landed, and jumped straight into Gina's arms. Mother, look. Ugly Duckling can fly. When can we eat the roasted swan? Little Gwai asked in a baby voice as it hugged Gina's arm. End of chapter. Chapter 2466. Since Meg wasn't around, Mamie's put up a notice to close for a week straight away. However, Mia felt bored, so she continued to open the ice cream shop, and Gina helped out in the shop. Swans are so cute. How can they be roasted and eaten? Gina smiled as she reached out to scratch Little Gwai's nose. Then, she looked at Ugly Duckling, which was squatting on the ground and had already retracted its wings. Its golden wings had already disappeared and turned into a mark on its back. Compared to its originally dim color, it seemed to have a layer of gold lining, and it looked rather impressive. Don't fly around on Ugly Duckling in the future, especially during the day. You'll be caught, Gina instructed Little Gwai with a serious expression. Oh. Little Gwai nodded obediently and didn't forget to make a face at Ugly Duckling. Your Highness, Little Mistress drank some fruit juice and has fallen asleep, Phyllis said with a sense of relief as she walked into Irina's office. It's been hard on you, Irina said as she looked at Phyllis, who had obviously lost a lot of weight over the past few days, and even had 2 obvious dark circles under her eyes. Over the past few days, she finally understood how hard it was for Meg to raise Amy alone. because she saw how hard it was for Phyllis with her own eyes. A small baby wouldn't do things according to your wishes at all. It's okay. I'm fine. Phyllis smiled but couldn't hide her fatigue. Drink this glass of water and have a good sleep. Today, you just have to hand the child over to Ashley. Irina picked up a glass of water beside her and dripped a drop of milk of life into it. The rich scent of life instantly filled the entire office. Just a whiff of it was enough to make one feel refreshed. Phyllis took the glass of water and drank it in one gulp. Then she looked at Irina with a serious expression and said, "Your Highness, I really only need to have a good sleep in the future. I don't need something as precious as the milk of life." This was the milk of life that could save lives. Now that the tree of life was gone, every drop of the milk of life that the princess had was gone, she felt very embarrassed to waste it on her. "Idiot, you've already reached the bottleneck. Go back and take a nap. When you wake up, try to break through the bottleneck and see if you can break through the threshold of level 7, Irina said as she gave her a chestnut. Oh. Phyllis covered her forehead and left. She was still a little confused. She was just taking care of the baby. How did she reach a bottleneck? Closing the office door, Irina sat at the desk in a daze and whispered to herself, "I don't know if he's doing well over there. It's still a bit reckless to go down alone. Moreover, that thing seems to have appeared again recently. I have to make a trip to Abyssal Island to take a look." Meg and Nancy had afternoon tea. The atmosphere was relaxed, just like two friends. Nancy seemed to be quite interested in his experience, so Meg had to make up a cliché story about an inspirational young man who kept innovating. However, she seemed to be very satisfied with the story. By the end of afternoon tea, her favorability towards him had increased by 2 points. "System, if this goes on, do you think she'll fall in love with me?" Meg came out of the coffee shop on the top floor with a strange expression. "Based on the current analysis, this possibility is extremely low," the system replied. Meg pursed his lips and did not refute. He could actually feel that Nancy's emotions towards him were more of a kind of appreciation. It was the appreciation of a superior person towards a rival artist, more or less with a sense of condescension. Of course, he was quite satisfied with this situation. This way, if he suddenly disappeared in the future, she would not have to frantically look for him. After returning to the dormitory, Meg left the building in disguise. There are many options for disguises, such as the staff. Why did you have to choose women's clothing? She sat in the passenger seat with a puzzled expression on her cold face. Is this the so-called women's clothing only once or countless times? Meg was stunned. Why didn't you say so earlier? Meg pushed the blame to her while taking off his skirt. She turned her face away and rolled her eyes. Moreover, even if he did not disguise himself, with his strength, it was still very easy for him to sneak out of the building without anyone noticing. After changing back into men's clothing and a new face, the flying car stopped in front of the gate of the largest trade city in Tucker City. Tucker Trade City was the largest and most comprehensive trade city in the entire underground city. It was also regarded as the trading hub of the entire underground city. All kinds of daily necessities could be traded here, from artillery to heavy ships. "What do you want to buy?" she asked. "Let's walk around first. I don't know what to buy, so I'll broaden my horizons." Meg walked towards the machinery trading center in front of him. She frowned slightly but still chose to follow him. As soon as they entered the gate, a huge warship parked in the hall attracted Meg's attention. Yuan-level warship. It was eliminated by the military 200 years ago and is now a civil warship. She introduced it to Meg. "How much is one?" Meg asked. "It's not for sale to you. Can't I buy it for my daughter as a toy?" "No." Meg reluctantly looked away from the warship. Although it was a warship that was eliminated by the military, it was still an advanced warship that the system could not build. The first floor was full of firearms. Meg took a quick look around. Other than a few military-supplied firearms, he could find all kinds of firearms here. Firearms are sold like cabbages. Aren't you worried about gunfights every day? Meg could not help but ask. You need a document to buy a gun, and every gun is recorded. All the information about the gun used in the crime can be found immediately, she answered calmly. Meg nodded thoughtfully. It sounded like there was nothing wrong with it. Shopping without buying anything in the afternoon completely suppressed Meg's spending power. In addition to the machinery trading center, Meg also went to several daily necessity centers. Compared to firearms that could only be bought by big arms dealers, those small commodity wholesalers were more representative of the ordinary people in the underground city. After one round, Meg felt a sense of familiarity. The underground world gave him a similar feeling to Earth in many ways. They had completely broken away from the feudal oppression and the ordinary people had more rights. Although the aristocratic families still had a lot of power, they could only hide behind the scenes and did not have much influence on the ordinary people. Their lives were so much better than the ordinary people of the Norland continent. On the way back, Meg looked at the skyscrapers outside the window in silence. She glanced at him and was a little confused. When do you think the people of the Norland continent can live like them? Meg suddenly looked back at she and asked. She looked into Meg's clear eyes and finally shook her head. She did not know and could not say. However, this idea of his was already very dangerous. Meg smiled and looked out the window again. That day will come. End of chapter. Chapter 2467. The popularity of the Chef King competition made #Hades Challenge rise to the top of the hot search list again. The juicy beef meatball that had been hammered 23,000 times was so delicious that the judges' souls left their bodies. It was really something to look forward to. That night, many people couldn't sleep because of the noisy hammering sounds upstairs. Many people sacrificed their lives heroically, and many people couldn't lift their arms the next day. Because the price of the ingredients was still affordable, many housewives were eager to try it. There were also bosses who captured Meg's hammering movements overnight, completed the programming, and created a beef hammering robot, which received hundreds of thousands of orders. There were even restaurant owners who accompanied their head chefs to create new dishes overnight, so that they could add a signature dish to the menu the next day. This was a carnival for foodies, and it also gave some people a new password to wealth. Meg didn't care about all this. He only cared about the rapidly increasing number of fans. It had just exceeded 1 million yesterday, and today it had successfully exceeded 3 million. Furthermore, it was still increasing at a terrifying speed. Wonderful. What's the point of cultivating? I can just become a superstar and become a god through incense. Meg used his mind to open the fridge and poured himself a glass of iced orange juice. System, have you calculated the best solution? How can we ensure that the underground city doesn't wage war on the Norland continent? Meg asked in his mind as he drank the juice. This system has built 1 million data models based on the available information. In the end, it came to a conclusion, but this conclusion is a little strange. Don't keep me in suspense. Hurry up and say it. Meg was interested and put down the glass in his hand. According to this system's professional model calculation, maintaining the current political structure of the underground city is the most stable solution for the Norland continent. Mag furrowed his brows, but he quickly put on a thoughtful expression. In the past tens of thousands of years, the political structure of the underground city has been relatively stable. Although there have been some changes and evolutions in the political structure with the development of technology and social changes, overall, the actual power of the underground city is still controlled by a few big families. In the past tens of thousands of years, the underground city has never launched a large-scale war or invasion on the Norland continent. If this balance is broken, the probability of the two worlds colliding will increase exponentially. The system said. So, perhaps the people of the underground city need to change, and some classes need to change too. However, the Norland continent doesn't want them to change the most. Meg frowned. Given the difference in power between the underground city and the Norland continent, it would be a one-sided massacre if the underground city started a war with the Norland continent. Currently, the one who was actively promoting the changes in the underground city was the Marshal of the Army, Ferdinand. Now that he thought about it, he was working under Ferdinand. This is going to be a little troublesome. Meg browsed through the information about the major corporations that the system had given him. Needless to say, Ferdinand must have done something to his wristband. Therefore, other than microsurfing and browsing some useless information, he did not do anything else on his wristband. The system's learning ability was indeed as powerful as he had said. It had already successfully hacked into the military's intelligence database and obtained first-hand top-secret information. Judging from the current situation, if he wanted to protect the Norland continent, he should join forces with the major corporations and destroy Ferdinand, the challenger to the old order. However, although he had the title of the most powerful person on the Norland continent, he was only a demigod after all. There was still a big gap between him and a real god, and the gap between him and Ferdinand was even bigger. Every corporation had more than one extraordinary behind them. If he were to go and talk to them about cooperation, it would be no different from sending himself to their doorstep. Moreover, as a transmigrator, he had an inexplicable fondness for people like Ferdinand who had a sense of responsibility for their social class. Strength is ultimately the foundation. Seems like I have to see if I can get anything from the divine monument first. Meg made up his mind and threw his messy thoughts to the back of his mind. Chief, this is Horace's statement and a list of names. These scumbags. Bastards. Outside the interrogation room, a middle-aged policeman sent the interrogation record to the chief. He could not hide the anger in his expression. Thank you for your hard work. The chief reached out and patted him on the shoulder. He glanced at Horace, who was fixed on the medical bed, and turned to leave. This incident was no longer something that he, the chief of the investigation bureau, could control. The game between the higher-ups would decide the final direction of this incident. As for this list of names, it was nothing. The military had already taken a clear stand to investigate this incident strictly, and the presidential palace had also given clear instructions. The Dixon family was very powerful, and the few corporations they were on good terms with had also started to exert their power, including the few celebrities who had self-destructed in the past 2 days. They were all just trying to divert attention and reduce the traffic of this incident. Of course, those few were not good people either. It was just that it was a pity that they had gone from canaries to abandoned pawns, and a superstar of a generation had been sent to jail. If that judge who had no clue could sentence Fergus to death, the problem would be much simpler. After all, that person was arrogant and ruthless, and was not influenced by the various powers. He had no qualms about causing trouble. Big sister, very soon, I will be able to avenge you. I will definitely make that fellow pay with his life. In a dim room, a young girl squatted in the corner and bit her lip. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. These 2 days, the microblogs were especially lively. Following Horace's fall from grace, from the godfather of movies to a rapist, the entertainment industry was like a domino effect. 8 A-list celebrities were exposed for their various crimes. The once glamorous stars had become bloody and cruel murderers and rapists, which made the onlookers' worldview explode one after another. More and more victims were speaking out, testifying against the filthy actions of those beasts. It was like a different world's version of. The successive news, each more bizarre than the last, caused the popularity of Horace's incident to drop significantly. Even Fergus was gradually mentioned less and less, and disappeared from the search rankings. Meg woke up early in the morning and glanced at the microblogs. The people who had been exposed were all cannon fodder. No matter how glamorous a celebrity was, they were nothing more than pawns in the hands of the corporations. This moment could be said to be a true portrayal of this. Then let me add fuel to the fire. Meg searched for Fergus and found an article with the sister of the victim in the Fergus incident as the first person. After confirming the content, he forwarded the microblog with the attached text. Some people should not be forgotten, and criminals are no exception. End of chapter. Chapter 2468. Thanks to Meg's series of tricks, the Chef King competition gained a lot of attention on the internet. It was locked in as the most popular variety show of the year in advance. Meg as the cause of Horace's incident and the dark horse that had successfully advanced to the finals had also become the focus of attention on the internet. As soon as this tweet was posted, it immediately caused an uproar on the internet. Brother Justice, why? That's why I fell in love with this man. Justice has yet to arrive. Isn't that an absence? Is this a direct confrontation with the Dixon family? Sigma, degree winky face. In just a few minutes, the number of comments in the comments section had exceeded 10,000. Horace's incident had shaken the entertainment industry. More than 10 A-list celebrities had been exposed in scandals, and the public was jumping up and down in excitement. As a descendant of the Dixon family, Fergus received a lot of attention after Horace exposed that he had participated in the torture and murder of underage girls. However, as more and more strange news broke out in the entertainment industry, it successfully diverted the attention of the public, causing the popularity of this incident to drop again and again. It was already very difficult to see any relevant trending posts. On the eve of the highly anticipated final of the King of Chefs tournament, Hades, the most popular contestant, forwarded a tweet related to the Fergus incident. Soon, #FergusMurderCase was pushed to the top of the hot search list. The Horace incident was triggered by Hades, and he was also known as Brother Justice. However, after that tweet, Hades did not post any other news. This made many people think that he was still under pressure and did not dare to participate in these matters. No one would have thought that after 2 days of silence, 2 hours before the start of the finals, he would actually directly fire at Fergus. Boss, Hades is tweeting again. Lucian, who was not fully awake yet, picked up Amos' call and heard his helpless and angry voice. What did he send? Lucian sat up in bed when he heard the name. It's Fergus this time. Amos' voice sounded bitter. This guy? Lucian had already seen Hades's latest tweet. When he saw those words, he was both angry and amused. The suicidal self-destruction of the A-list celebrities in the entertainment industry had finally managed to reduce the popularity of Fergus. However, Hades's tweet had once again pushed Fergus's incident to the top of the trending list, causing all of the Dixon family's efforts to go to waste. Who knew what expression the patriarch of the Dixon family would have when he woke up and saw this news? The presidential palace and the military had already expressed their stance, so the pressure on him had lessened a lot. As long as he was impartial on the surface, there would be nothing for him to do. However, Fergus's ending was supposed to be decided after the competition between the various parties. Now that Hades had brought his popularity back up, things were different. Do we need to do anything now? Amos asked. Lucian stared at the screen in silence for a while, then shook his head and said, Don't do anything. This is an account protected by the military. Are you going to block it? The final of the Chef King competition was about to begin. Hades had posted this tweet at such a sensitive time. He wondered if the McCarthy family had instructed him to do so. Sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight was obviously the best plan. Okay, then I'll deal with the 2 directors first, Amos said tiredly. Thank you for your hard work. After this incident, I'll give you a vacation. Take your family and children to have fun for a few days, Lucian said and hung up the phone. Sitting by the bed, Lucian looked at Hades's account in silence for a long time. It seems that Nancy has extended an olive branch to him. Lucian shook his head. However, can the McCarthy family really protect him for a lifetime? The Dixon family is not to be trifled with. Young people are so impulsive. This kid is still trying to increase the popularity of the show at this critical moment. It's so high that I'm a little scared. After director Johnny was woken up by his assistant, he smiled bitterly when he saw the top 3 posts on the trending list. The biggest beneficiary of Horace's incident was obviously the Chef King competition. The variety show, which had gradually declined, was revitalized. It even broke the broadcast record in the semifinals. Hades could be said to be the biggest contributor. No one could compare to him. However, the popularity of the show was high enough. Today's final was very likely to set a new record. At this critical moment, Hades actually went to stir up Fergus's momentum again. 2 days ago, He even hinted to Hades that he should be careful with his words and actions on the internet during the recording of the show. Good Lord, it seemed that he didn't take it seriously at all. Although he had the McCarthy family behind him and never got along with the Dixon family, the other party was after all one of the top 10 conglomerates. He was not a sick cat. If he was pushed too far, everyone was afraid that he would bite. You go out first, I'll make a call. Johnny got up and washed his face, then dialed Nancy's number. I already know about it. You don't have to worry about it. Just get ready for today's final. Nancy's cold voice came from the other end of the phone. Johnny answered obediently. Good Lord, it seemed that Miss Nancy already knew about this, and it was very likely that she instructed Hades to do it. He knew that Hades had lunch and afternoon tea with Nancy for 2 consecutive days. Even he, the director, was not qualified to enjoy this kind of treatment. Dixon Manor. Crack. The exquisite crystal bowl exploded into countless pieces on the marble floor. The head of the Dixon family, Merlin, looked at the microfeed with a dark face. Beside him stood a pale middle-aged man. His legs were trembling, and his voice was trembling as well. Master, Fergus is still a child. Merlin glared at him coldly. Shut up. You piece of trash, you raised such a useless thing. You've brought shame to the family. Thump. The man's legs went soft, and he knelt directly on the crystal shards. Merlin retracted his disgusted gaze from the man's hand and turned his head slightly. This guy, I want him dead in 3 days. In the shadow behind him, the space distorted slightly, and a low voice replied, Okay. Many people might have forgotten how the Dixon family started out. Merlin sneered. Angelina, who had just finished washing up, looked at Hades's microfeed with an agitated and worried expression. Horace's incident might have been a coincidence, but Hades's microfeed this morning was tantamount to a declaration of war against the Dixon family. Was it worth it to offend a terrifying conglomerate for a stranger? End of chapter. Chapter 2469. Meg didn't care if it was worth it or not. Anyway, he wouldn't be able to use this alias for more than a few days. It was just a pity that he would lose these 20 million fans. One had to know that these were all true fans. How could such a rare item appear on his body? He gained so many fans just by cooking. He increased the fans' fondness and stickiness with his character and persona. He did everything according to his own preferences. If he didn't like it, then he would face it head-on. He didn't care if he was a tycoon or not. If they really got into a fight, he would just run. Was being a tycoon a big deal? If they really got into a fight, Ferdinand would definitely let him get away. Meg's current goal was to complete the first mission as soon as possible. Then, he would go and comprehend the stone tablet and confirm if the legendary divine tablet was effective for him. As for rescuing the people of the underground city from the abyss of suffering and making their surfing life more colorful after meals, he would leave it to the other heroes of the underground city. As the representative of the Norland continent, his butt couldn't be crooked. He woke up, washed up, had breakfast, and then went to the dressing room to do his makeup to prepare for the official finals. Meg almost didn't communicate with the staff during the whole process to avoid causing trouble for them in the future. He thought that Johnny would come and talk to him, but he didn't see him until he was done with his makeup and was ready to go on stage. This made Meg's impression of Nancy improve a little. This maiden's values and facial features were really as upright as hers. The Chef King finals and Horace's trial made Hades's post very popular. Even if 2 A-list celebrities were exposed early in the morning, it couldn't suppress the popularity of this incident at all. On the other side, the Chef King finals were also in the 3-minute countdown. Meg entered the familiar arena under the guidance of the staff. There were only 2 desks left on the stage today. The judges were already in place. As soon as he entered, everyone's gazes fell on him. There was a complicated look in their eyes. Nancy, however, smiled and nodded at him. Meg returned a smile and then quickly went on stage to his own desks. The outcome of today's competition was no longer important to him. After the competition, he would follow Nancy to the McCarthy family. However, out of respect for his opponents and the audience, He would still try his best to serve a dish that would make everyone's eyes light up. Angelina then walked out of the contestant tunnel. Today, she was wearing a moon-white chef's uniform. Her makeup seemed to be a little thicker than a few days ago, but it still couldn't hide the exhaustion on her face. Her eyes, in particular, were bloodshot as if she hadn't rested well. What's wrong with Angelina? Johnny got up and looked at Angelina. It was terrible for her to appear on screen like this. I was too excited about the finals today, so I didn't sleep well last night, said Angelina apologetically. Hurry up and get a bottle of Vitality water to adjust her condition. Makeup artist, choose a pair of contact lenses for her to wear. Her eyes need to look more spirited. Johnny hurriedly instructed. The staff busied themselves and Angelina looked radiant again, at least on the surface. Angelina stepped onto the stage and stood in front of the console beside Meg, smiling at him. Meg nodded slightly. This girl didn't look like someone who couldn't sleep because of the finals. How did she end up like this? Then, he noticed that Angelina's favorability towards him was 96. Fuck, was she lovesick? Meg was shocked. This favorability was too exaggerated. It was probably difficult for couples to reach such a level when they were in love. But he didn't do anything, did he? He even gave her the cold shoulder. Why did her favorability towards him increase overnight? Could it be she was a masochist? Meg felt a little headache. He didn't want a girl to fall too deeply in love with this fake appearance. Okay, everyone get ready. The countdown to the live broadcast begins. 10, Johnson's voice rang out, and the judges and contestants at the scene immediately got into the zone. At this time, 1 billion people had poured into the live broadcast of the finals of the Chef King competition. Hades's post in the morning had brought a lot of attention to the Chef King tournament. Hades, he's the one who posted the tweet, but why am I more scared than him? Bro, put the public chat on the protection. If something happened to him, it must be the Dixon family. I just want to know what kind of surprises Hades will bring us today. The comments flooded the screen crazily. The countdown ended and the live broadcast began. As usual, the host introduced the judges and the 2 contestants at the scene. Hades, who had infinite possibilities, versus Angelina, who was bold and imaginative. This battle was full of uncertainty and could be said to be very interesting. The rules of the finals had been changed compared to the semifinals. There were no restrictions on the ingredients that the contestants could use. In other words, as long as the ingredients could be found in the dungeon, the contestants could make a request. This included ingredients that were worth tens of millions of copper coins. With the rich and overbearing temperament of the Chef King competition, they were absolutely full of confidence to play like this in the finals. So when the host announced the rules of the competition, the audience couldn't help but start to look forward to whether the ingredients that only existed in legends would appear in the competition. Unlimited ingredients. It's worthy of the Chef King competition. I want to see the frozen golden lobster. It's a top ingredient from thousands of years ago. There are only 12 of them in the entire dungeon, and the auction price is over 100 million. I want to see the deep-sea crescent fish. The last time it appeared was 500 years ago, right? The audience discussed enthusiastically, while Meg and Angelina had already begun to write down the ingredients they needed on the tablet. The ingredients that Angelina chose were reasonable and the price was moderate. The most expensive one was a deep-sea ice blue coral, which was worth 3.2 million, but it was far from the top ingredients that the audience expected, which somewhat disappointed the audience. However, this was Angelina's style. She used a bunch of strange ingredients to combine them into an imaginative delicacy that amazed everyone. Meg looked at the tablet and fell into deep thought. The audience didn't have much expectation for the ingredients he chose. After all, he chose extremely ordinary ingredients in the previous 2 rounds. Turning something rotten into something magical was a very important reason why Meg was so popular with the audience. Meg was indeed thinking, but he was also communicating with the system. System, have you found a high-quality substitute for pork loin? Just make it more expensive, don't save the money. Unlimited ingredients, we haven't fought such a rich battle yet, Meg thought. In the cave of the Heart of Darkness in the north of the dungeon, there is a dragon-like major monster called Medusa. Her kidney tastes excellent, and the taste and texture completely meet the host's requirements as a replacement for pork loin, the system quickly replied. What about the price? What's the price? Medusa has level 10 strength when it reaches adulthood. It's proficient in illusions and has a strong toxicity. It hides in the intersecting caves of the Heart of Darkness and is extremely difficult to kill, let alone capture. Now, the only living Medusa in Tucker City is auctioned for $300 million, and it's in the hands of the McCarthy family. That's it then. Meg's mouth curled up slightly, and he wrote a line of words on the tablet. Let me tell you that this book will end in August. Recently, I've been preparing to wrap it up. I've thought a lot and overturned a lot of things, but I've roughly figured it out. I've been in a very bad state recently, so I'd like to apologize to everyone here. End of chapter. Chapter 2470. A Fresh Medusa's Kidney. The judges' expressions became very interesting when they saw the ingredients that Mag had chosen. It was not unusual to use a level 10 magical beast as an ingredient in the top circle. But Medusa was too precious and extremely rare. Only 2 or 3 of the judges present had tasted it. Contestant Hades's choice of ingredients today is a little surprising. Medusa is an extremely precious ingredient, and I have only tasted it once. The taste is memorable, and the price is also unforgettable. David smiled and said, I just don't know what kind of dish contestant Hades is going to make with the snake kidney, but it's a completely unexpected choice. Medusa is an extremely expensive ingredient. 3 months ago, a Medusa was auctioned at the auction house, and the price was as high as $300 million. Fuck. I can't believe I can see a meal worth $300 million. To be precise, it's just a Medusa's kidney, which is worth less than $300 million. But under the premise that it's fresh, a Medusa worth $300 million indeed needs to be slaughtered for its kidney. If I remember correctly, that Medusa was auctioned off by the McCarthy family 3 months ago. The audience's enthusiasm was also ignited. This level of ingredient was not something that the public could get their hands on. It could only be seen in this kind of competition. Johnny was also a little confused. The rules of today's competition were set by Miss Nancy. With the power of the McCarthy family and the influence of the Chef King competition, as long as it was an ingredient from the dungeon, it should be no problem to get it to the arena within 10 minutes. But now, Meg wanted a fresh Medusa's kidney. The assistant had just explained to him how rare it was. This kind of magical beast was extremely violent and ruthless. There were only a few adult Medusas that could be brought back to Tucker City alive. He had no confidence to get it in 10 minutes. But it was the show's boast. It was written down in front of more than 1 billion live viewers. It would be too embarrassing if he could not get it. Miss Nancy, we've checked. There's only one living Medusa that has been brought back to Tucker City this year, and it was bought by Miss Norma from your family 3 months ago. You see, Johnny sent a telepathic message to Nancy, choosing his words carefully and anxiously. Norma? Nancy frowned. After a few seconds of silence, she said, Leave this matter to me. The snake kidney will be sent to the show in 10 minutes. Thank you for your hard work, Johnny hurriedly said. The director would only cut Nancy's scene. The latter had already gotten up and left the stage, probably to contact Snake Kidney. Miss Norma and Miss Nancy were sisters of the same father but different mothers. They were both direct descendants of the McCarthy family and had a noble status. However, it was rumored that the relationship between the two of them was not very harmonious. Johnny was also a little worried. He did not know if Miss Nancy could successfully obtain the snake kidney from Norma. If she failed, he would have to think of a way to smooth things over. He was now regretting that he hadn't done a simple communication with the contestants before the competition. He should have at least given the contestants a range behind their backs. He was too careless. As an experienced variety show director, this kind of low-level mistake could be said to be because he was too arrogant. Meg then wrote down a few side dishes and spices. Compared to the Medusa's snake kidney, The other side dishes were extremely ordinary and did not make things difficult for the production team at all. Meg's choice of the Medusa's snake kidney was actually more or less like a dragon's kidney. Compared to the giant winged dragons on the Norland continent, in Meg's heart, the dragon-like Medusa was more in line with the image of a dragon in his heart. Anyway, it was the production team who boasted about it. He did not care if they could get it or not. After the ingredients were chosen, the host received Johnny's request to save the situation. He then said, "All right, now that the contestants have chosen their ingredients, we will need to prepare them from other sources because some of the ingredients are too precious. It will take about 10 minutes of waiting time. The countdown for the competition will start when the ingredients are presented." Looks like the production team was too careless. They actually made more than 1 billion viewers wait for 10 minutes. This is hilarious. I guess the director did not expect Hades to choose the Medusa's snake kidney, right? This year's Chef King competition is destined to be a classic. The audience was not too annoyed that they had to wait. Instead, they were gloating. This was the live broadcast of the show. More than 1 billion viewers were waiting. Of course, they could not just wait like that. Hence, the judges started to do their work to liven up the atmosphere so that the waiting time would not be so boring. 3 minutes later, Nancy returned to the judges' table and nodded slightly at Johnny. Johnny heaved a sigh of relief. Only then did he calm down. However, Miss Nancy should have paid a hefty price. This debt would most likely be blamed on Hades. Mag stood there calmly as he watched the judges make a fool of themselves. Then he felt a gaze from the corner of his eye. It was reserved and passionate. Is this girl really so obsessed with my beauty that she can't extricate herself? Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. Superficial women only saw beautiful skin and often turned a blind eye to his interesting soul. 10 minutes later, the ingredients were brought to the operating table one by one. The ingredients that cost more than 100,000 had their own individual display screen, allowing the audience to see the true appearance of the precious ingredients. The finale was the Medusa's snake kidney. This snake kidney was as bright as a ruby. As soon as it was brought to the table, a faint fragrance wafted out. There were still some golden blood vessels inside the snake kidney. It seemed to still be flowing. It looked like it had just been slaughtered and brought to the table. As expected of the top ingredient. It hasn't even been cooked yet, but it's already so fragrant. It's mouth-watering. Dave praised. Last time, I only ate a piece of frozen snake meat. It really can't compare to a fresh one. The Medusa's snake kidney is considered the essence of the Medusa. It is usually cooked by pan-frying or steaming. I wonder which one contestant Hades will choose to cook and what kind of snake kidney he will bring to the table. Old Hunter said with anticipation. The ingredients have been brought to the table. The competition officially begins. There are 2 hours left. Contestants, please begin. The host announced the start of the competition. Mag carefully examined the snake kidney in front of him. It was indeed a top-notch ingredient. Even though it had just been slaughtered, it didn't have the slightest smell of blood. Instead, it had a faint aroma that made him want to take a bite out of it. The Medusa's snake kidney was the size of an adult's palm. It was equivalent to 6 or 7 pig kidneys. It was more than enough to make a spicy Medusa's snake kidney. Yes, in today's competition he wanted to show the dungeon's citizens the charm of hype. Chapter 2471. Roasted pork loin was the dish Meg had prepared for the finals. But today, he had changed the pork loin into a snake loin. He wanted to make a roasted snake loin for the people of the underground city to broaden their horizons. Meg planned to finish it quickly today. The Medusa's loin was plump and tender, and it didn't have the slightest fishy smell. Instead, it had a unique fragrance, so there was no need to remove the fishy smell. This was also the attribute of a top-notch ingredient. It only needed simple cooking to release its hidden deliciousness. How to cut the plump snake loin was a skill. The snake loin was fatter than the pork loin, so Meg first sliced it into several equal pieces. He first cut it diagonally, then cut it straight in the opposite direction. His speed was slow and delicate, and it was somewhat instructive. The flower cutting knife was used to make the snake loin more flavorful, and also to make the finished product look better. After slowly cutting a few pieces, Meg began to speed up. The kitchen knife in his hand gently cut the snake loin like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. The incisions were clearly visible, but the snake loin didn't break. He was so fast that the human eye couldn't follow. I thought this was slow work, but it turns out that he's trying to teach me. Have you learned it? Eyes, yes. Hands, I failed. It's okay, I'll be able to see it clearly as long as I slow it down 10 times. The audience was all praising Mag's knife skills. The slender snake loin was unbelievably obedient in his hands. Looking at the heavy kitchen knife, it displayed extremely delicate knife skills. It was a pleasure to watch. Contestant Hades' knife skills are definitely top-notch among the contestants in this year's competition. Whether it's the divine skill of dissecting sheep the day before yesterday or the exquisite knife skills of cutting the snake loin today, they're all eye-catching. Julian nodded. With more and more technological products entering the kitchen, and more meticulous division of labor, there were fewer and fewer young chefs who could calm down and hone their knife skills. Even though Simon had been eliminated in the top 4, he was still rather impressed with Hades as a young man. If the younger generation of chefs could be as down-to-earth and hardworking as him, there would be a lot of talented chefs in the cooking world. While Mag was busy, Angelina wasn't idling either. She had carved an ice crystal snow lotus fruit into an ice crystal phoenix, and her exquisite carving skills were equally amazing. However, Angelina's selection of ingredients was a little messy, so it was still difficult to guess what dish she was going to make. The loin was cut into a plate and marinated at the side. Meg then began to heat the oil in the pan. The dish. The most important thing about stir-frying was the heat control. Under a big fire, a little bit more heat control would make it look overcooked, and a little bit less heat control would make it look undercooked. It was a test of the chef's skill. This snake kidney was so precious, and it was impossible to find a second one in Tucker City, so there was no room for mistakes. The pork kidney was put into the pot with hot oil. It first slid in the pot for 30 seconds and then immediately came out of the pot to drain off the excess oil. Once again, he heated the oil in the wok and added in the spices until they were fragrant. Then, he added in the green and red peppers and other side dishes and stir-fried them until they were ready to be served. At this time, he poured the kidney into the wok and stir-fried it. He tossed the wok in one hand and the ladle in the other, letting the kidney and the red and green side dishes blend into one, flipping and jumping in the wok. The flame spread from the bottom of the pan to the center and jumped on top of the ingredients like a special effect. Fuck, the pan is on fire. Is this a special effect? Special effects for a gourmet show. Isn't this a little too lame? It's not a special effect. It's a special cooking method. It's full of smoke and fire. This scene is amazing. Please accept my admiration. The bullet screen was flooded with comments, and the audience expressed their surprise. This magical way of cooking was really amazing. Generally, a fire in the pan is a mistake, but contestant Hades is calm as if everything is under control. Is this the special cooking technique he's going to show today? David was surprised. Using fire to add color to a dish is a relatively common method in the traditional cooking of the Crossy, but it's usually used in the process of frying and roasting meat as a finishing touch. It's the first time I've seen such a fierce fire in the pan. I don't know if it's just for show or if there's a special effect. Old Hunter rubbed his chin and observed, from the charcoal roasted lamb chop to the handmade meatballs to today's spicy pork kidney, contestant Hades's cooking techniques are really flexible and versatile. I wonder if today's product will be as amazing as his performance. I'm really looking forward to it, a female judge said with a smile. Her words did not hide her admiration for Meg. The colorful ingredients were flipped upside down in the pan and jumped in the fire. The sufficient fire made the color and state of the dishes reach their best state. Turn off the fire and put the dish in one go. When the camera slowly zoomed in and focused on the fresh and glossy stir-fried kidney with red and green embellishments, only 15 minutes had passed. It's done. Meg put down the iron ladle and took half a step back. It's done. The audience was shocked. In the previous 2 rounds, Meg was the last one to finish, and it took him almost 2 hours. There was also a saying on the internet, the first one to start will lose. However, they did not expect that Meg was not only fast, but also ridiculously fast. In order to show off their skills or get more exposure, contestants usually cooked for more than an hour. That's it? I even took off my pants. I feel like I've seen something, but I also feel like I haven't seen anything. I didn't expect Hades to get up so fast. It's amazing. I just clicked on the live broadcast. What happened? The bullet screen was flooded with comments. They were also shocked by Meg's performance. Isn't this too fast? Johnny couldn't help but jump up from his seat. This was the final of the Chef King competition. It was the pinnacle of this season and also the perfect ending. The advertising revenue of this final alone had reached $2 billion. After receiving the money, he had to complete the quota. If Meg finished the competition in 15 minutes, how was he going to spend the next hour or so? Although Angelina was the most popular contestant before the show, everyone knew that the person the audience wanted to watch the most was Hades. Contestant Hades is a little surprised today. David glanced at the director's seat, thinking about how to extend the show's duration. Old Hunter looked at Mag with approval in his eyes, and said, "Speed is not the standard to judge a dish's quality." Contestant Hades showed us a special cooking method for the Medusa's kidney, and the finished product looks very good. I'm looking forward to it. I can already smell the aroma. It looks like a good dish. Nancy also smiled. Although she was a little surprised, the admiration in her eyes was more obvious. The staff stepped forward and brought the spicy pork kidney to the judges' table. Chapter 2472. The fresh and shiny stir-fried snake waist exuded a rich fragrance. It was the unique fragrance of the Medusa's snake waist, which had been sublimated in the cooking process. The plate slowly turned in front of the judges, receiving the serious scrutiny of each judge. The color, fragrance, and condition were all impeccable. Although the whole process only took 15 minutes under the watchful eyes of everyone, the finished product was flawless. At least it looked like that on the surface. The judges gave their comments on the fiery snake-like waist. Perhaps it was Johnny's idea, but the 10 judges all expressed their own opinions, making this segment much more substantial. As usual, the staff divided the fiery snake waist and presented it to the judges. Nancy picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of the kidney. The kidney, which had been cut horizontally and vertically, was twisted into a beautiful arc after being stir-fried. It was more like a blooming flower, quite beautiful. She had eaten the Medusa's snake liver, which was cooked by the cook at home using the pan-fried method. It was delicious beyond words. But this was the first time she had tasted a snake kidney, and it was stir-fried. The fragrance of the Medusa was not unfamiliar. It added a little spiciness, but it highlighted the original taste of the snake kidney. She had heard more than once from excellent chefs that the more precious the ingredients were, the more the cooking had to be done around the ingredients themselves. This was what an excellent chef should do. After looking at it for a while, Nancy put the snake kidney into her mouth. Fresh, tender, fat. Her teeth easily cut open the fat and tender kidney. The snake kidney, which had been slaughtered for less than 30 minutes, had an amazing freshness. The fresh and sweet juice splashed out, mixing and colliding with the sauce hidden between the knives, playing a beautiful symphony. The taste buds exploded silently, as if there was a beautiful music playing in the ears, making people intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves. Different from the pan-fried method, this fiery snake kidney was more intense, like the flame rising in the pot, and seemed to have penetrated the kidney, making it difficult to resist. Rip. That was the sound of clothes bursting. Nancy's eyebrows trembled slightly, but she did not panic. In order to prevent the last accident from happening again, she had already changed into a double-layer tear-proof suit, so there would be no problem of exposure. She just did not expect that this fiery snake waist would bring her such a strong feeling. It was delicious and indescribable. It's a pity that Norma only has one Medusa. Otherwise, we can have another one when we get back. Nancy's lips curled up slightly, as if she had already imagined Norma's furious look in front of the screen. Hades once again conquered my taste buds with his strength. After roasting and boiling, he showed a unique understanding of the cooking method of stir-frying. The deliciousness of this Medusa's snake waist has been perfectly interpreted. At least, I haven't tasted anything better so far. Nancy put down her chopsticks and looked at Meg with undisguised admiration. After speaking, she looked at the director and smiled. "Please give me a bowl of rice. Obviously, this is a side dish." "Arrange it," Johnny quickly said. Miss Nancy had always been cold and aloof on the show. Her interactions with the contestants were only a few sentences. On the other side, David also picked up a piece of snake kidney and put it into his mouth. The camera slowly zoomed in, focusing on his expression. From surprise to intoxication, that subtle change in expression was accurately captured. Rip. Then, 2 buttons on his shirt burst open, revealing his round beer belly. "Amazing! This fiery snake kidney is amazing!" David didn't care about his clothes at all. He exclaimed, "The tenderness of the snake waist has been perfectly preserved in the stir-frying. This is incredible! The snake waist's rich aroma has been perfectly interpreted under the stimulation of the spicy and salty taste. The creative knife has given the snake waist a sense of beauty, and at the same time, allowed the taste of the seasoning to penetrate evenly into the snake waist. With one bite, the juices and sauce mix and splatter everywhere, making your soul ascend to heaven. I would like to call it the best dish of this year." David looked at Meg with a fanatical gaze. He hadn't felt this strong feeling for many years, the awe and shock of food. But at this moment, he suddenly felt the same as when he first entered the industry. Back then, he hadn't seen much of the world. If he walked into a roadside restaurant, perhaps he would be moved by their signature dishes. The judges couldn't help but look at David. This fence-sitter's speech today was quite sincere. Contestant Hades's control and understanding of the fire is indeed at the level of a genius. Even though I've been a chef for hundreds of years, I'm still willing to call him an expert. Old Hunter put down his chopsticks, his face full of emotion. This kind of control must have been achieved through thousands of practice sessions. A young man like him has a bright future. It could be said that this fiery waist had completely conquered every judge present. Even some of the chefs among them had begun to think that they were not as good as Hades. In 3 consecutive matches, there were 3 completely different types of dishes. The depth of Hades's culinary skills and cooking skills shocked the judges. They didn't know where the program team had found such a monster. Letting him compete on the same stage as the young chefs was really a bit of a bully. Shocking. At the scene of the Chef King competition, a group of judges is licking a contestant's boots. "Damn it, I'm hungry again. But I just ate." I would like to call Hades the best contestant in history. 1 dish in 15 minutes, stunning the whole audience. He is indeed Brother Justice. The audience was also boiling, and the bullet screen was crazily flooded. That's the guy who took my snake and made it into a dish. Damn it. Damn it. In a detached villa in McCarthy Manor, in a pink bedroom, a girl in a JK uniform was squatting on the bed, gritting her teeth as she watched the live broadcast. "Nancy is going to bring you back? I'll definitely make you regret coming here." On the stage, Angelina glanced in the direction of Meg. Although Meg had received high praise from all the judges, she didn't look anxious at all. Instead, she looked a little happy. She carved many exquisite little things in her hands, and gradually placed a picture of 100 beasts on a large plate. Although Meg's experience had attracted a lot of attention, Angelina's magical carving skills had also attracted a lot of attention from the audience. After the praises from the judges, the scoring segment began. As the 10-second countdown ended, Meg's score appeared on the big screen. Hades's score, judges' score, 90, online score, 10 total score, 100. Chapter 2473. Meg looked at the score on the big screen and was stunned for a moment. This was a bit exaggerated, wasn't it? He knew the online score in advance. These days, his popularity had allowed him to surpass Angelina and take first place in the competition. However, the judges' full score was a bit beyond his expectations. This also meant that he had become the champion of this year's Chef King competition in advance. Even if Angelina also got full marks from the judges, his score would never be full again. Hades was the first person in the history of the Chef King competition to get full marks. I feel like I've witnessed history. Where did the program team find this monster? Why didn't I hear anything about him before? As the final score was confirmed, the whole internet was in an uproar. The bullet screen was flooded with comments, and the hashtag Hades final full score quickly climbed to the top of the hot search list. This topic made the live broadcast room's popularity soar again. Johnny thought that it would be difficult to maintain the popularity of the whole competition, but judging from the current straight-up popularity of the live broadcast room, it was very likely to set a record for the peak popularity of the live broadcast room. The judges all congratulated Mag for getting full marks, and gave him another round of flattery. Everyone present was a veteran. Although Hades could only be regarded as a junior at his age, from Nancy's special attention to him and the strength he showed, he would definitely join McCarthy Manor after the competition. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was like a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. Meg responded politely and said to the audience, "It doesn't matter if you don't have snake kidneys at home, you can use pig kidneys as a substitute. Spicy pig kidneys are also a rare delicacy. In fact, I've always been making spicy pig kidneys before." From the expensive and extremely precious Medusa snake kidneys to the commonly seen pig kidneys in the market, this replacement was a little surprising, but it also helped Meg gain a wave of popularity from passers-by. He didn't pretend to be high-end, just like his dishes were full of smoke and smoke. Hades clinched the championship with full marks, making the intense final lose its suspense. However, there was not much dejection on Angelina's face. She was still sculpting the work in her hands seriously. In this year's Chef King competition, Angelina had been a strong contender for the championship from the beginning to the end. Anyone who encountered Hades, who had appeared out of nowhere, could only return empty-handed. The old audience looked at her with some pity. It seems that Angelina is planning to sculpt 100 beasts. Her creativity is amazing and she's so fast. She's already halfway done. David shifted the topic to Angelina. Angelina's carving skills and creativity are the best among the contestants this year. I didn't expect her to use pure carving to present her final work. Old Hunter stroked his chin and smiled. Maybe she'll slap me in the face. As the topic changed, Meg, as a finalist, also received a seat. He looked at Angelina with some doubts in his heart. This girl's strength was not bad. If he hadn't interfered, she would have been this year's Chef King. However, this was a cooking competition after all. If she completely gave up on cooking and focused on sculpting, what kind of operation would that be? Admit defeat in advance? Under the puzzled gaze of the crowd, Angelina completed her 100 beasts carving with great efficiency after half an hour. It was somewhat exaggerated to call it 100 beasts carving, but more than 10 beautifully carved major monsters were distributed in a carefully created large sand table. The flowers, birds, and beasts were beautiful, like an exquisite piece of art. Angelina used her uncanny carving skills to transform the originally completely unmatched ingredients into a different kind of cute appearance. Oh my god! That fox is so cute! It's actually carved with a white jade radish. So, are all chefs artists? You can't be a chef without some skills. The audience was full of praise for Angelina's performance. The judges' expressions were a little complicated. Angelina's performance today was really amazing, but this was the King of Cooks competition, after all, and it was a competition of culinary skills. If this was all she had done today, it would be a little disappointing. Angelina put down the carving knife in her hand and glanced in Meg's direction. Suddenly, her expression became dignified and determined. What's she doing? Meg caught the change in her mood. Just as he was thinking about what she was going to do, he saw her pick up a box of flour and pour it on the completed 100 beasts carving. White powder flew everywhere. There was an uproar at the scene. Johnny jumped up directly from the director's seat. It can't be, right? Meg frowned. Could it be that she broke down on the spot because she couldn't accept the outcome of failure? But she didn't look like such a person. The audience in front of the screen was also shocked by this scene. They widened their eyes and looked at the white powder that gradually dissipated. The image gradually became clear, and the sand table in front of Angelina reappeared in front of everyone's eyes. The original 100 Beasts carving disappeared and was replaced by a human face, the face of a young man. The contestants who had been surfing at the forefront for the past 2 days were definitely no stranger to this face. It was Fergus Dixon, the son of the Dixon family and the confessed murderer in the Horace incident. Just before the live broadcast in the morning, Hades had already pushed him to the top of the hot search list. At this moment, Angelina's 100 Beasts carving turned into Fergus' face after she poured a bucket of flour on it. There were 2 words below his portrait: murderer. The noise at the scene had quieted down. Everyone looked at the portrait and fell into a strange silence. How dare she? Mag furrowed his brows tightly. He didn't expect Angelina to do something like this in the finals. The Dixon family wasn't to be trifled with. He dared to do this because he had Ferdinand's backing, and more importantly, he could abandon this identity at any time. He didn't need to worry about revenge at all. Angelina was different. She was just a little girl with no background. She was simply digging her own grave by putting the tycoon on the fire in such a high-profile manner. My scalp is numb. She's too reckless. Is this the legendary dream linkage? One detonated before the competition, and the other directly nailed to death during the competition. I love it. Who wouldn't love such a brave girl? The more than 2 billion viewers who were watching the live broadcast were deeply shocked at this moment. The bullet screen was flooded with comments. Director Johnny's expression was almost twisted together. What the fuck was this? Couldn't they just focus on the show? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.